This is Rogers TV.
This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Tuesday, February 23rd. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa, 0. In Smiths Falls, 1 degree. And here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. Doctors concerned about what's ahead in the province's battle against COVID are speaking out, both about the plan to get you vaccinated and the need to avoid a potential third wave of infections. Here's City News reporter Kevin Meisner.
The Ontario Medical Association wants business restrictions kept in place to head off a third wave of COVID-19. Even as many areas of the province are easing restrictions, the OMA thinks they should be ramped up. The Ontario Medical Association is holding a briefing this afternoon. Among the topics, including how to tackle the spread of variant cases, vaccine delays, and the distribution challenges. Meantime, family doctors in Ontario also say they have very little, if not no, information on vaccines rollout. On Friday, retired General Rick Hillier announced that seniors over 80 would be contacted in the next week or so with details on how to get their vaccine. The Canadian press then suggesting that it would be the doctors who would distribute that information. The Ontario College of Physicians, however, saying that they're still waiting for any details. I'm Kevin Meisner.
City News time at 9:01, and now your forecast with meteorologist Jill Taylor.
For Ottawa, the Valley, and Smiths Falls today, periods of light snow, especially as we work through the latter part of the morning into the afternoon. A mild high near 2 degrees. Tonight, chance of flurries -2, and tomorrow, periods of snow, 5 centimeters possible. The high again about 2 degrees. For today, the high +2.
And right now in Ottawa, it's 0. In Smiths Falls, it's 1 degree. Students at Ottawa's largest school board can expect many of the pandemic precautions in place now to be in place in the fall as well. That includes things like part-time in-person classes for high school students. A staff report says the plans are being made for the next school year starting in September, resembling in many respects this one. Students will remain in one class as much as possible, and virtual schools will still be in operation. Secondary students in the Ottawa Carleton board can expect a return to the hybrid schedule, and quadmesters in the fall of 2021. The report also says changes may be made later in the school year next year. It just all depends on the COVID situation. It appears the pandemic is taking a toll on school principals. A new survey suggests the pandemic has placed significant pressure on principals at Ontario schools, with those at virtual schools feeling the most stressed. People for Education surveyed principals at just over 1,100 in-person, hybrid, and virtual schools. 57% of principals from virtual schools reported levels of stress were not manageable. City News time, 9:03. The White House says President Joe Biden will discuss issues of mutual interest with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau today, from COVID-19 to climate change and the economic ties that bind our two countries. The press secretary for the White House, Jen Psaki, says no immediate changes to Biden's Buy America regime are on the horizon, though. Trudeau is likely to use this meeting to ask Biden for help in procuring COVID-19 vaccines and also for assistance in getting China to release the Canadians that are currently detained, Michael Spavor and Michael Kovrig. MPs are set to debate amendments now made to the bill senators made on the medical assistance in dying. Federal government agrees Canadians suffering from certain mental illnesses should be entitled to receive medical assistance in dying, but not for 2 years. That is 6 months longer than the Senate had proposed. I'm Andrew Boyle. For News Anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
He's got the news and the views.
He's got views on the news.
It's the Rob Snow Show on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Now, I'm not a big fan of the snow, but I quite prefer temperatures above the freezing mark, so let's call it a draw. Good morning. Rob Snow Show, Rogers TV, City News. We're back at it. We're pedal to the metal until noon. 3 hours of talk radio with all the news of the day and opinion and commentary about the news of the day. And you're in the middle of it all during the talkback hour that we do every morning between 10 and 11 o'clock. An hour of phone calls, hearing from our listeners, old and new alike. We'd love it if you took part today. 750-1310, 750-1310, 613-750-1310 is our call-in line. And the email address is therobsnowshow@ottawa.citynews.ca. Conservative Member of Parliament Michael Chong is going to join us this morning coming up in just a few minutes from now. And we're going to talk about what happened in, what passes for the House of Commons these days. And this unanimous vote by MPs declaring that China is committing genocide against the Uyghurs, ethnic Muslim minority. Conservatives voted for it. Of course, it was a conservative motion. It's not binding on the government. Really, can you imagine the Trudeau government bringing forward a motion like this? Not on your life. But New Democrats supported it, Blocs and Greens, and even some Liberals. But really, not the Liberal MPs who really matter, right? Not the Liberal MPs with the power, not the cabinet, and not the Prime Minister of Canada. They went missing when it was time to go on the record. Cabinet ministers and your Prime Minister went AWOL. They were MIA. And they sat it out. Prime Minister didn't even bother showing up. Now, I know Michael Chong is going to have a lot to say about that. Foreign Affairs critic for the Conservatives. I'd really like to know what you take away from that vote from yesterday. And the Disappearing Act. The Disappearing Act of Prime Minister Trudeau and his obvious instruction, the whipping of the cabinet. You're not to be on the record on this one. You are to be MIA. Ladies and gentlemen, what does that really say about the character of this Liberal government? Some say it shows it's an unserious government. That this government, the Trudeau government, it's a government that loves to spin a fantastic tale about it, how it stands in defense of minorities. How it loves to tell anyone who will listen that it stands in defense of the rights of women and the rights of girls here and all over the world. But really, this party, the Liberal Party of Canada, the party of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, what it's done with this vote, what it has really done is it has shown its true colors. Since the Prime Minister and all of his cabinet ministers could not summon the courage to cast a vote in our House of Commons out of fear that it would upset the Chinese government. And in so doing, it has chosen to go along to get along. And like COVAX and vaccines, it's just one more shameful episode brought to you by the Trudeau Liberals. That's the view of some. Now others, what do you say? I guess they're more pragmatic. Maybe you're one of them. I think this is going to be Ian Lee's take when he joins us after the 9:30 news. Why would we want to upset China now? They're holding our people hostage. And yesterday's vote in the House of Commons doesn't do very much to help Michael Kovrig or Michael Spavor. If anything, it may damage any prospects that Mr. Trudeau has of someone in his government eventually securing their release. That's kind of the realpolitik kind of view, I guess. 806 days now, though, those two Canadians have been held hostage by the Chinese government. And there are those in the media today saying Mr. O'Toole's motion yesterday may have actually hurt their chances of ever getting home and back on Canadian soil anytime soon. So look, we're going to be all over that story today. The vote in the House yesterday. Uyghur genocide. Michael Chong, Professor Ian Lee coming up after the 9:30 news, and we'll take your calls during the talkback hour. I'd love to get your take on that one. As well this morning, vaccine news. On vaccines, did Canada cheap out in any attempt to make a homegrown vaccine, a made-in-Canada vaccine, to make it here and then produce it here? Did we cheap out? Did the Trudeau government cheap out when it came to investing, funding companies that were already working on the cutting edge of some of this technology, vaccine research like the mRNA technology that is now being widely deployed by companies like Pfizer and Moderna? See, that's what people in the industry are telling a House committee this week. You know what this government did? It cheaped out when it came to investing in a made-in-Canada vaccine, both developing a vaccine here and then making sure that there was a facility to produce the vaccine here in sufficient numbers. We cheaped out. And because we cheaped out, now we rely on foreign companies. We rely on American companies. We rely on British companies like AstraZeneca. And because of that, we're beholden to whatever supply constraints happen to come our way because we were cheap. Now, when you think of the Trudeau government, and when I think of the Trudeau government, one word that comes to mind is it's not cheap. It's not cheap when I look at the size of the deficit at $400 billion, when I look at the overall national debt now north of $1 trillion. But the allegation is that this government was too risk averse. That it wasn't willing to part with the money, which is hard to believe just given all the money that was spent in such a short period of time. There's a good write-up in the papers today about this. The fact is, outside of Medicago in Quebec, there just wasn't a lot of funding made available to other companies that were already working on some of these novel vaccine solutions. You know, a few $1 million here, a few $1 million there. Moderna, by comparison, in the United States, Moderna got $1 billion from the government of the United States, the Trump administration at the time. $1 billion. Moderna had never made a vaccine before. Moderna had never even had a single drug ever approved by the Food and Drug Administration in the whole history of the company. It was a big risk. It was a big roll of the dice. But I guess if there's $1 billion, it improves the odds. In the United Kingdom, the Boris Johnson government invested the equivalent of $1.5 billion Canadian dollars into the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine. Not 1 million or 3 million or 5 million, 1.5 billion. Here again, in Canada, outside of Medicago and Quebec, the most money some Canadian companies were qualifying for is like $5 million. And they had to wait months and months and months on end just to get the money. But now look at where we are in late February of 2021 and look at the results. Look at the payoff, I guess you could say. Risk, reward. Look at the Americans and look at the British and look at where they are with their vaccination plan and look at where Canada is. We're way behind. Is that fair criticism? What do you think? And Adam Skelly Yeah, you remember him, the barbecue rebel from Etobicoke? The city of Toronto sent him a bill for $187,000. You remember he opened his restaurant for a few days in open defiance of the public health order that he had to be shut down, and the police were there for 3 days. And now, as part of this $187,000 bill from the city of Toronto, he is being told you must pay the policing bill for those 3 days. And it's $165,000, and he has until the end of the year to pay it. Should he? We'll talk about that this morning as well on the Rob Snow Show on City News.
I always knew I was going to own my own business, and I've always wanted to have a store. And I sort of figured when the right concept came together at the right time, I would move forward with that plan. And so through doing some environmental initiatives in the restaurant group that I was with prior to opening this store, it just triggered my path towards being more environmentally conscientious and wanting to make more of a difference, and hopefully encouraging, inspiring other people to want to do the same, at which point the idea for All Eco was born. I have some really fun products. I have a really wide spectrum of products. So the things we look for in terms of qualifying products are sustainably made, upcycled, recycled, zero waste, all natural, no harmful chemicals to like the environment or to our bodies. We have like fun stuff, so like really clean burning candles, lots of really natural body care and skin care. I put a real emphasis on Canadian products. I really try to support up and comers, and I always source Canada first. The refill bar is really important to me. It's really huge. I think that's been exciting as well, because I thought it was going to be a real process in convincing people that this is a better way to go. And actually it was just like right away there was a built-in affinity towards doing refill, which has been great. We closed, I think, probably we were closed down by before the second week of March. Just didn't feel we could comfortably or confidently stay open, even though I do sell essential products, like in terms of the cleaning. But we just didn't feel we could make a safe space for ourselves or our customers at that time, and especially with the information we had at the time. So we did close our doors, at which point I did not have a website, because that was I hadn't even scheduled myself to have a website at that point. So that was sort of like full speed moving towards that and trying to drive the business, at the same time still get myself on the map because I was so new. So during that time, as we were building the website, we were still doing a lot of video shopping and private shopping, online shopping, like online phone, text. Any way I could do business, I was doing it. And there was really a nice show of support for my business during that time, which was really, really encouraging. And now, we are fully set up online too.
Opinionated Ottawa icon.
The Rob Snow Show returns
On Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
MPs voted to support a motion formally recognizing China's treatment of its ethnic Muslim Uyghur population as a genocide. This happened yesterday afternoon in the House of Commons. The Conservative motion passed overwhelmingly in the House, 266-0. The Liberal cabinet abstained from voting. Michael Chong, Foreign Affairs critic, Conservative member of Parliament, joins me this morning on the Rob Snow Show. Good morning.
Good morning, Rob.
Why bring this motion forward in the first place?
Well, because after the Second World War, Canada and other leading democracies of the world made a promise that never again would we stand by silently and allow a genocide like the Holocaust to take place. And so we even came forward, we signed the first international human rights treaty, the 1948 Genocide Convention, And we made that commitment. And so fast forward to 75 years later, and there is a genocide going on. There are some 12 million Uyghur Muslims in China. They're a minority in a country of 1.4 billion people. And over the last 5 years or so, they've been subject to mass sterilizations, sexual violence, and mass detentions of upwards of 2 million people by the Chinese government. And so we cannot stand idly by anymore, and we have to call it for what it is, a genocide.
Okay. What is your reaction to the Liberal cabinet abstaining from the vote?
Well, I think it shows a lack of leadership on this file. I think it demonstrates that they don't know what to do on their approach to China. We believe that the government needs to come forward with a new framework on China that takes a much stronger stand on defending our citizens, our companies, and a much stronger stand defending our values, such as a belief in human rights.
Okay. What now? It's not binding on the government. What now? What do you think should happen now?
Well, I keep hearing that, and that is true, that it is not binding in a legal, statutory sense of the word. We cannot take the federal government to court to say, look, the federal government is not abiding by the terms of this motion. However, it is binding in a democratic sense of the word, in a normative sense of the word. Canadians get together every 3-4 years and they cast a ballot and they send their elected representatives to Ottawa. When those elected representatives pass a motion, the government should abide by the terms of that motion. Otherwise, why do we sit as parliamentarians? Why do we sit as MPs in the House of Commons? So the government has, I think, an obligation to follow the terms of the motion. If they don't, I'm going to be calling them to account on it. But to answer your question, I think what should happen next is the government first should formally and actively contact the International Olympic Committee to seek the relocation of next winter's Olympics. We cannot be sending Canadian athletes to a country in the shadow of a genocide. We should be joining with our allies, like the United States, and calling on other allies to recognize this for what it is, a genocide. We should be banning imports from that region of China. There is evidence that up to 500,000 Uyghurs are being forced to pick cotton through a coercive state-run scheme. So we should be banning the import of cotton, the import of tomatoes from that region of China because of evidence of slave labor. So those are just some of the things that we should be doing in response to this recognition.
Do you think there is an opportunity to impose sanctions similar to Magnitsky Act type sanctions, Mr. Chong?
Absolutely. That's another thing we're calling on the government to do. You know, it was conservatives that introduced the Magnitsky Law in this country, which allows the government to put sanctions on individuals for things like gross human rights atrocities. So we're calling on the government to work with our allies to impose Magnitsky sanctions on those officials who are implementing these draconian policies in that part of China. We also believe the government should withdraw from the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. They should make a decision to ban Huawei, and they should join with their allies in the Quadrilateral Security Dialogue, which is a new group of 4 countries that has formed: the United States, Japan, Australia, and India. We believe Canada should be part of that group. That group's whole purpose is to counter China's increasing belligerence in the Indo-Pacific region.
Okay. Chinese officials say Canada is meddling in Chinese affairs, and the accusations of genocide are based on lies. What is your reaction to that?
Well, my reaction is quite simply that first, a country that signs a treaty gives up a portion of their sovereignty. Whenever a country signs an international agreement, whether it's a free trade agreement, whether it's a human rights treaty, whether it is other treaties, they give up a part of their sovereignty. And in this case, China, like Canada, has signed on to the 1948 Genocide Convention. So they have given up the right to completely control their own affairs in that regard. And Canada has an obligation under the treaty to prevent genocide and to punish the perpetrators of the genocide. The second thing I'd say in response to that is that their denial simply isn't believable. They denied there's satellite imagery that has been collected over many years, high-resolution, high-definition satellite imagery, that proves that hundreds of detention camps holding up to 2 or more million Uyghurs have been built in the last several years. China denied the very existence of these camps until presented with satellite evidence. When presented with the evidence, they came up with a different story, that these camps were simply training centers and schools.
Right.
Every step of the way, they have denied the existence of these camps, they've denied the existence of what they're doing. The evidence is overwhelming, and the denials simply aren't believable.
Well, plus, there are their personal accounts in the media of particularly women who have spent time in these camps and the atrocious living conditions that they have survived. I would like to ask you, Michael Chong is with us this morning, Foreign Affairs critic for the Conservative Party of Canada, the official opposition. How would you respond to accusations that the move yesterday in the House, the passage of this motion, could damage the prospects for the release of Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor?
Well, we're very concerned about Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor, as we are about Robert Schellenberg, who's on death row, as we are about Hussein Jalil, all 4 Canadians who are in detention, in wrongful detention or wrongfully on death row in China. But that said, we believe that the government's approach isn't working. Their approach to China isn't working. And the proof is that the Chinese government continues to kidnap, continues to threaten our citizens as we go forward. And so we believe that a different approach has to be taken. The passive, equivocating approach of the Prime Minister simply emboldens China to continue with this kind of behavior. I think we need to take a stronger stand, make it clear to the Chinese that there are lines that cannot be crossed. And I think a new framework that includes some of the elements we've talked about taking that tougher stand, is the way forward.
Okay. Outside of the China file, the Prime Minister is going to speak with President Biden today, 2 hours or so set aside for this meeting, bilateral meeting. What would Conservatives like the Prime Minister to press upon Mr. Biden? What are top issues for Conservatives right now, Mr. Chong?
Well, we think that the government should more closely align with the United States on its approach to China. So we think that they should be talking to President Biden about the release of Mr. Kovrig and Mr. Spavor. We also believe they should be talking to China about the recognition of a genocide. The U.S. administration, the Biden administration, has recognized what is going on in China is a genocide. The Biden administration, we think the government should be working with the Biden administration and seeking to join this quadrilateral security dialogue, which is currently made up of the U.S., Japan, Australia, and India. So those are some of the measures we're hoping the Prime Minister will bring up with the U.S. President today. I think the government often talks about working multilaterally, but often when given the chance to do so, doesn't take the option. The U.S. is clearly taking a stronger stand on China, as is Australia, as are other countries in the Pacific region. We need to join with those democratic allies and take that tougher stand.
Michael Chong, thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you very much.
Conservative Member of Parliament and the Foreign Affairs critic for the official opposition. Back right after the news on City News.
1 for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Good morning. It's Tuesday, February 23rd. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa, 0. In Smiths Falls, it's 1 degree. And here's what's making news this hour. Ontario Medical Association wants pandemic restrictions to continue, maybe even get a little bit tougher. The doctors group feels with the vaccine rollout and COVID variants, there has to be a sustainable public health measure to head off a third wave of infections. The doctors group also wants a clearer message from the province on the rollout of vaccines for the general public. Now, the Ottawa Carleton District School Board has sent a letter to the Health Minister asking the education workers receive priority for vaccinations once that public rollout increase happens. Chair Lynn Scott sent the message to the Education Minister, Stephen Lecce, and Health Minister, Christine Elliott. American President and Prime Minister Trudeau will hold a virtual meeting this afternoon. This is the first meeting Joe Biden has scheduled with another world leader. The two will discuss items of mutual interest. It's expected there will be a joint briefing by the two coming up late this afternoon. A safe third country agreement between Canada and the United States at the heart of a case going before the Federal Court of Appeal today. Federal lawyers are going to argue Refugee Pact does not violate the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, as a lower court had ruled back in July. City News Time, 9:32. I'm Andrew Boyle. For news anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Strong voice.
Strong opinions.
Rob Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
He is the poor professor from the Glebe. Professor Ian Lee, back from the Sprott School of Business at Carleton University. Good morning.
Good morning, Rob.
Prime Minister Trudeau and President Joe Biden are going to hold a virtual bilateral meeting today, reportedly going to last for 2 hours. What do you think our Prime Minister should be bringing up with the American President today?
I can tell you what I think he should be bringing up, but let me immediately state I don't think he will.
Okay.
Unfortunately, I think it's going to be a squandered opportunity. Here I am judging it hasn't happened, but we know a lot about Mr. Trudeau. He's been in the public eye for a very long time, and we know a lot about President Biden, who's been in the eye in politics for 50 years. And I just don't think Mr. Trudeau is going to want to jeopardize saying anything critical or negative or challenging to Biden, because I think he thinks he has to cement the relationship. I think he's got actually tremendous degrees of freedom because Biden's not Trump, and Biden knows he's not Trump. Trudeau knows that Biden's not Trump, and so therefore there's that degree of simpatico between them,
right,
simply because Trump is gone, and that will give degrees of freedom to Mr. Trudeau that he should seize the moment, but I don't think he will. What he should be saying is along the lines of, look, we have this long, the standard, true, accurate stuff. We have this long relationship between our two countries going back, 200 years or more, longest undefended border in the world, blah, blah, blah. We have an enormous number of interests in common.
Yep.
However,
integrated economies, trading relationship, all of this stuff, right? Yeah.
However, President Biden, we have a problem. And it's this Buy American thing.
Right.
Not just you, but in the Congress. Let's speak truth to power. We're speaking privately, confidentially. There's no media around. You've got some hotheads there in the Democratic Party who want to close down trade. There's some state governors who are opposed to trade, although far fewer. And so we want to discuss with you, President Biden, a continental national, a real NAFTA. As opposed to a partial NAFTA, a NAFTA that does not allow the U.S. to impose tariffs on Canadian goods,
right,
whether they be aluminum or anything, or Buy American. And now he is going to, I hope, Mr. Biden would say, well, now that we're speaking frankly, I want to talk about all those industries that you have protected from American companies, like dairy, broadcasting.
Yep.
How about cell phones?
Banking.
Highest cell phone rates in the world. And then they can have what's called a frank exchange of views, right, to get to the bottom of this issue. Why is this the number one issue? Because 2 billion that's with a B, $1 billion of stuff crosses the border every day.
Yeah.
Our economies are tightly integrated, and when either side acts up or misbehaves, as Trump did, as we do by banning American cell phone companies, then it hurts ordinary Canadians and it hurts ordinary Americans. Now, do I think that conversation is going to take place? No.
You don't? Okay. All right. Well, at least you're honest anyway. What do you think they'll talk about?
Well, they're going to...
Well, they'll talk about the pandemic and pandemic response.
They'll talk about the pandemic response, and that's good. That's good.
Right.
Maybe, I hope Mr. Trudeau can say, look, there's no cameras around. Can you tell me how come you guys are getting it right and we're, I know we're screwing up really badly,
right, yeah.
but you guys are just outperforming us.
Can we get some of that Pfizer vaccine from Kalamazoo? Do you think that you
Can we get some of that stuff, whatever, right? Your mojo stuff, your vaccine stuff? Because we really need it badly in Canada because we're doing so badly, even compared to third world countries, for goodness sake. Please don't quote me, Mr. President Biden. I don't want that to get out in the media.
Right.
Because, then everyone will know that I really know that I'm screwing up very badly. Mm-hmm. So that's one thing. They'll certainly be talking about carbon. And not carbon tax, but GHG.
Climate change, the Paris Climate Accord, and all that stuff.
And here again is something he should bring up, but I don't think he will. I mean, first off, we know they're simpatico, meaning they share views, not identical. I'm not sure that the carbon tax is going to go through the U.S. Senate anytime soon, but I could be wrong. I'm not sure he'll even propose it, but I could be wrong. But I think that the idea that U.S. is rejoining the Paris Accord, and they both agree it's a huge problem and that it has to be addressed.
Yeah.
What I don't think Mr. Trudeau will unfortunately mention are governors that go rogue and break the law. I'm referring to the Michigan governor who wants to deny the Line 5.
Oh, yeah. Gretchen Whitmer.
Half a century, 3/4 of a century, and they're refurbishing the line. It's my understanding. I can be corrected, but I believe that they're either replacing the line or refurbishing it, major renovations, whatever.
Yeah.
Let's not get hung up in the details. The Line 5 is shipping oil and gas to Canada. Yeah. And we, in Southern Ontario...
Into Sarnia, and a little bit of it goes under Lake Mackinac, I think it's called. Yeah.
And I hope that he brings it up and says, look, President Biden, we've got these two wonderful countries with this very long relationship, and we just can't have premiers or governors going rogue like this and breaking the law. This is a clear violation of the spirit of our relationship, of NAFTA, and cutting off this pipe, which the governor knows is going to cause great suffering to the people of Ontario. It's way beyond irresponsible. I think it's unethical. Canada is a very cold place in the winter, as we've just learned from the last 3 weeks, if we forgot, from the previous winters and endless winters of our lives.
Well, we've just seen what happens if you can't heat your place because of what's happened in Texas, right?
Yes. So what the governor of Michigan, Democratic governor of Michigan, is trying to do is reproduce a little sort of a mini Texas in Southern Ontario. Now, in Texas, it was a combination of screw-ups, of mistakes, of errors.
Sure.
This is deliberate on the part of the Michigan Democratic governor, and to impose great suffering and harm on the people of Southern Ontario. Surely to God, the Prime Minister of Canada can raise that with President Biden and say, look, President Biden, you're the president, you're a Democrat, she's a Democrat. Can you just pick up the phone and tell her to knock it off?
Right. So you would expect, the talking points will be released later on. Prime Minister Trudeau was pleased to meet with President Joe Biden today virtually, The two talked about... recovery, the continued response and the global initiative to fight COVID-19, Build Back Better will probably be in there. The ongoing fight against climate change and to achieve net zero carbon emissions by the year 2050. But beyond that, Line 5, you think maybe that doesn't make it into the talking points, but if you were Prime Minister Trudeau, that's something you would want to talk about. Well, we're talking about, that's the most important pipeline infrastructure Canada has. It goes into Sarnia, and then it goes off to the refineries into Quebec as well. I mean, it's all of the major metropolitan centers in eastern Canada rely on that pipe. So
and just remind everybody, 38% of the population of Canada is in Ontario. 38 million, excuse me, not that. 38%. The 14 million Canadians in Ontario are 38% of Canadian population. Add on Quebec, because Quebec, for all its posturing saying, oh, we're against fossil fuels, they have a larger ownership of big trucks and SUVs that use gasoline, and they are huge users of natural gas. Nothing wrong with that. Yeah. But they rely on it. So when you put in the population of Quebec, which is another 20% of Canada, Ontario and Quebec are 58%, which is just not quite, just shy of 2/3 of the totality of Canada is completely dependent on that pipe, and it's the wintertime when it's cold, and you have to heat your homes. Yeah. And I like to remind everybody, every last school that I know of, every last hospital, every last university building that I am aware of uses natural gas to heat, including homes, of course. In other words, all those tall high-rise buildings, all the public schools in Canada filled with all those teachers who are teaching about how bad fossil fuels are, their classrooms are heated with natural gas. The classrooms of every university, to my knowledge, let's just say most universities, so I won't be accused of exaggerating, most universities, I'm talking Carleton, I'm talking University of Ottawa, I'm talking U of T, York.
Carleton is heated with fossil fuels?
All the universities in Canada. Yes. With natural gas.
I thought it was heated with Imaginarium. I thought that's what they...
Yeah, we sit there and we, when it goes to minus 25, let's pretend it's not minus 25. Let's imagine it's plus 25. We just got the signal wrong.
Look, let me ask you this, and then we can... Because it's an important meeting, okay? And I think you've got it pretty well down, right? What do you think Biden wants to talk about? Do you really think he wants to talk about our protected industries, supply management, and...
Probably not.
Right.
So no one thinks that I'm on some kind of a jag on this.
Right.
I have read the U.S. trade rep, the USTR. Anybody can Google it, so they can double check what I'm about to say. They're free reports on the web, on the government website. And they publish a report every year to the President and the Congress, going back 25 odd years, back to the Clinton years at least, if not before then. I never went back beyond that, before that. And they have listed every country in the world alphabetically, so Canada's right there just before China on their alphabetized list. And the list for Canada, the page length, is about 8 or 10 pages, if I recall. And they list all the irritants. So it's not my imagination. Successive governments, under the Clinton years, under the Bush years, under the Obama years, under the Trump years, have listed these irritants, this list that I've just mentioned. And there's some others, by the way. There are others.
Yeah.
So it's not a figment of my imagination. Oh. The U.S. trade rep, who are the bureaucrats who prepare the trade file for the president, have been documenting this for literally 25, 30 years. So it's not imaginary. But having said that, their first meeting, I think they'll probably be looking for things that are, where they have interest in common. Climate change, of course, is probably going to be at the top of the list, along with the coronavirus, the pandemic. I think those two will probably be at the top of the list.
What about the detention of Meng Wanzhou in Vancouver, and if you could call it detention, whatever she's living under, and Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor, 806 days being held in China.
The third item on that list, and I don't even know the order, probably pandemic first, probably China, I'm going to call it, as opposed to the illegal kidnapping of the two Canadians. And I do believe it was illegal, and I do believe it was essentially a state kidnapping of the two Canadians by the Chinese government in retaliation against Canada. But that's really, I don't believe that's a top of the agenda item for Biden. The issue is the relationship with China. And Biden has a very tricky path to walk. He is not, I will predict very confidently, he is not going to roll back every Trump decision on China, because there is if you look at the public opinion polls, or you even listen to the leadership in both political parties, the Republicans and the Democrats, there is great concern, grave concern, great concern, and the U.S. intelligence agencies, they're having a freak out. They're having a meltdown over China because they're so concerned. And so China has got to be on. I don't just mean the two Canadians. They're not, and the woman in Vancouver that he's going to want to talk to Trudeau about the larger relationship with China, not just the Uyghurs who are being discriminated against very badly, very seriously by the Chinese government, but they're going to talk about things like theft of intellectual property. They're going to talk about 5G and Huawei, because Canada's the only country of the Five Eyes that has not banned Huawei.
Yeah.
And that really gets the U.S. intelligence people, really gets them excited, meaning not happily excited, very unhappily excited.
Yeah.
So those are the big three: pandemic, China, and.
All right. When we come back, you've always told me realpolitik, right? You're
I'm a Henry Kissinger.
You're a big believer in that.
I channel my Henry Kissinger
what is
as much as I can.
Pragmatic approach to our relationship with China in this country after the vote yesterday in the House. We'll talk about that next, and Alberta as well. Budget time is coming for the province of Alberta, and a lot of business groups, Professor, are saying it's time for an Alberta sales tax. Alberta, the only province without a sales tax. Talk about it next with Professor Ian Lee. Rob Snow Show, City News.
Well, we're celebrating our 43rd year. It's still family operated. We're in our second generation. We, pre-COVID, we're at about 1,000 employees. We have 20 stores from coast to coast in Canada. We do our own manufacturing. Right here in Ottawa, we have about 160 people that support Canadian-made manufacturing in addition to our retail stores. Taking you back to mid-March and the impact of the pandemic on Lee Valley. Lee Valley was actually in a tough spot. We had just launched our website a few months prior to that, and we were going through, a fairly typical deployment dive where your customers retract as they adjust to the website. And then under stress already, this pandemic hit. And in the early days, it was pretty critical. It hit us really hard. Stores were closed. We weren't sure what to do, so we had to go right into survival mode. As a result, we had to take our workforce almost back to half of where we were at because the stores were closed, and with 20 stores, that's a big retail workforce. But what we were able to do pretty quickly, with a little luck, being essential, selling tools and hardware, we were able to adjust our business model, with respect to the stores and our fulfillment operation. That new website that we were under stress worked out well for us because as the world was under house arrest, people were looking to online, and the conversion to our online sales in some cases almost doubled. And we saw tremendous interest in things to do at home. Where we were lucky once again and fortunate is that our product offering. Work at home tools, craft, hobbies, backyard, container gardening, you name it. What we sold was really appealing to people. With respect to our stores, Lee Valley, a rare unknown fact was that we were one of the pioneers of curbside pickup. We've been doing it for 25 years. Pretty much dove right into the application to help with the contactless shopping right away. We took the application, and it's not like a Apple application where you have to download it to your phone and clutter up your phone. This is literally resides right on our website. So you walk into our store with your phone, you pull up our website, and there's a little scan icon. You just tap that, select your store, off you go. You go through the showroom, you scan product, you can read more about it, you can check the on hand, you can add it to your cart, continue to shop, and when you're ready, you just submit it to the counter. We'll go pick it for you. We'll call out your name, we'll check you out, send you on your way. You haven't touched anything. It's completely safe, and it's using a device you're comfortable with and a website that you're familiar with. Amazingly, 9 out of 10 people that used it loved it and want to use it again.
Up with Rob.
The Rob Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News, 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
We're back with Professor Ian Lee, Sprott School of Business, Carleton University. Been to China how many times?
I've been teaching there since 1997, once a year.
Dozens, right?
Yeah, I'd say 15, 20 times.
15, 20 times. Okay.
Yeah.
So, you know what happened in the House of Commons yesterday with the vote declaring the actions of China a genocide, that it's committed a genocide against the Uyghurs and other Turkic Muslims, ethnic minorities in China. Now, so that's said and done, and everybody's wondering what the retaliation could look like. But I'm wondering, because you've always kind of had this pragmatic approach when it comes to not just this file, but most of your outlook in life, I think, is kind of like realpolitik pragmatic. What's a reasonable pragmatic approach on the Canada-China economic file?
It's probably too late now because Parliament passed it yesterday unanimously, save and except the Liberal cabinet. But I thought it was a major mistake.
You did?
And I have two reasons for criticizing it.
All right. Okay.
One is practical and pragmatic, realpolitik, and the other is on a more, call it, theoretical, principled level.
Right.
On the practical level, China is the second largest economy in the world. And I'm not saying that, therefore, we're going to bless evil or wrongdoing. That's not my argument at all. But I want to broaden it out to point that there are many countries in the world. There's 195 at the United Nations. And if you look at the Transparency International, which is an NGO in Berlin funded by the United Nations, that lists all the countries, not companies, countries of the world, from the most transparent and least corrupt to the most corrupt, least transparent. Well, all the Western countries, Canada, the U.S., European countries, are in the top 30. That's to be expected. They're the usual gang of suspects, to use Humphrey Bogart's famous phrase. But when you go down and look at the bottom, let's say 50 countries out of 195, or even the bottom 100, that's where the bad stuff is. That's where the really bad stuff is. Okay. And so, yes, China is not a democracy. Yes, it's a totalitarian or an authoritarian regime. Yes, they treat the minorities very badly. Well, welcome to the developing world. Now, that doesn't mean that all countries in the developing world are like that. I've been to many, many developing countries.
Yeah.
And they're not
does that mean we have to do business with them?
Well, are we going to stop dealing with, let me deal with my favorite one, the one that's run by a murderer thug at the top, and I'm talking Russia. Are we going to stop dealing with Russia? Are we going to stop dealing with Bangladesh or Pakistan? I can go through the list. You should see the number of countries on that list. Down that bottom, let's call it the Rogues Gallery list. Yeah. The bottom third of the Transparency International list. Yeah.
SNC-Lavalin used to like it to do a lot of business in Libya, for example.
So, that's the realpolitik. Are we going to be ethnocentric and say, look, we're only going to deal with other countries that act and talk and think like us? If that's the case, then basically we're only going to deal with the OECD. Okay. And a few other countries thrown in that are, progressing.
Like, for example, should we be selling weapons to Saudi Arabia?
There's another example. Yeah. There's 34 countries in the OECD. So let's throw in another 30-odd countries. Let's say the bottom third to the bottom half of 195 countries are really odious by our standards. Yeah. Are we going to stop end diplomatic relations and stop doing business with half the countries of the world that are probably about 80% of the population of the world? That's the practical question. And then specifically with China, what are we going to do? Are we going to cut off diplomatic relations? That's silly. Are we going to, say to our athletes, you can't go to the Olympics? That's just cutting off our nose to spite our face.
Really?
And hurting our own athletes. So my point is I thought it was intemperate. There are things that we could do, but I don't think that was just virtue. Conservatives complain, and rightly so, about virtue signaling by progressives. This was virtue signaling by conservatives. China's bad. See, we did a vote in the Parliament of Canada. Mm-hmm. The larger, more theoretical question, and it was brought up very nicely by John Ivison yesterday or today in the National Post. He said, let's not abuse or misuse the word genocide. He said, the Holocaust, there's no question it was genocide. Darfur, Rwanda. There was a deliberate attempt to exterminate that minority group in that population, period. Yeah. And China's doing a lot of really bad things okay, to the Uyghurs. But,
well, there's 2 million of them in prison, Professor.
Yes, but I don't think there's any evidence that I've read that they are trying to literally eradicate and exterminate all the totality of the Uyghurs.
Oh, if they're sterilizing the women, if they're told, they're there for 2 years, 3 years, and they're not even allowed to speak a word of their own language.
Rob, I'm not trying to suggest that what they're doing is nice or legal or appropriate. That's not my point.
Right.
I mean, the idea of genocide is the most extreme. It's as John Iveson said, it's the nuclear option. And we should reserve that word not for all bad behavior of bad countries around the world. And there are lots of countries around the world doing really horrible things to their minorities, whatever the minority is in that country.
Okay.
And I'm talking Pakistan. They murder, the young woman who was a Christian, was engaged to a Muslim, so they killed her because she was Christian. I mean, I think most people can agree that that's not acceptable, and targeting the Christian minority in that country. Or what they're doing in Russia, to groups, minorities in the Russian Federation. I mean, I can go on and on, but my point is that whether or not it reaches the level of genocide, I'm skeptical. I can say to you, I think that what they're doing is horrible, and should be condemned in the strongest terms. But genocide is a word we should reserve for the deliberate, systematic attempt to eradicate the totality or the vast majority of that population, and that's what Iveson was arguing, and I agree with him on that more theoretical level.
Look, we only have about 2 minutes left here. Alberta doesn't have a sales tax, only province without one. The Alberta advantage. No tax, right? No sales tax.
Yeah.
But now it's running a big deficit, deeply in debt. Commodity prices are coming back, but the oil price is not what it once was. And there are lots of calls, even from business groups. It's time to have a sales tax in Alberta. What do you think?
I want to quote Lewis Carroll because I love Lewis Carroll, the mathematician at Oxford who wrote Alice in Wonderland. The time has come, the walrus said, to talk of many things: ships, shoes, sealing wax, and whether pigs have wings. Bear out my little logical progression I want to develop here, why Alberta should adopt a consumption tax. Some people listening may say, has Ian Lee lost it, supporting taxation as a fiscal conservative? Here's my chain of thought. Number one, I do not believe that the Liberal Trudeau government, that there's any conspiracy to destroy or harm or hurt systematically the people of Western Canada. Point one. Point two, I do believe that amongst the Liberal elites, the Liberal decision makers, starting with Mr. Trudeau, they have big grins on their face, schadenfreude, that they're saying quietly, behind closed doors, not in the public. It doesn't bother them that, they're thinking, Alberta's in its really bad times, and, it serves them right. Because they're so dependent on fossil fuels and they're not changing their ways and that sort of thing. So if you accept those first two statements, then the third statement is, wouldn't you, Alberta, in your winter of despair and discontent, to use Charles Dickens' famous phrase from A Tale of Two Cities, wouldn't you want to do those things that will maybe reduce, not eliminate, but reduce your dependency on the Trudeau Liberal government in Ottawa and give you a little bit more degrees of fiscal freedom, because they're in desperate shape right now fiscally? And a consumption tax, a VAT tax, a GST tax, whatever you want to call it, will alleviate. I did not say it'll eliminate, but it will alleviate the pain and the suffering. It'll alleviate the fiscal mess that they're in. And so it will give them a little bit of more freedom and independence from Ottawa, so they're not quite so dependent on them right now. And if you want the theoretical justification, the OECD did the landmark study about 5 years ago looking at the four types of taxes: personal tax, corporate tax, real estate taxes, property taxes, and finally consumption tax. Yep. And they found, and this was based on 30 years of research, it was a meta study, and they found that overwhelmingly that the least interventionist, the least harmful to the economy are consumption taxes. And so they argued that government should rely much more on consumption taxes than any other type of tax. And the CD Howe has very honorably and legitimately acknowledged that in their various publications, where they argue that we shouldn't be jamming up the income taxes so high, because they are, the empirical research is showing this. that they're much more destructive or harmful to economic growth than consumption tax.
So yes, Alberta should have a sales tax. Okay, all right, I'm surprised. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Professor. Talk next week. Bye-bye. Professor Ian Lee, Sprott School of Business. In favor of a sales tax. In favor of a sales tax for Alberta. Back after the news, and then it's the Talk Back Hour, 750-1310 here on the Rob Snow Show on City News.
One for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Tuesday, February 23rd. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa, 0. In Smiths Falls, it's 1 degree. And here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. Ottawa Carleton School Board has sent a letter to the provincial government concerning education worker vaccinations. The chair of the board, Lynn Scott, asking Christine Elliott, the health minister, Stephen Lecce, the education minister, for the education workers to be prioritized in the public vaccination plan. Scott says education workers have been tireless in their effort to support safe operations of schools. It would ensure staff is safe and those supporting the high-needs students as well. The board is asking the ministers to make a formal public statement acknowledging priority education workers should receive in the vaccination program. We'll be hearing from the province's doctors today on the spread of the super contagious COVID-19 variants and also the rollout of these vaccinations. City News reporter Kevin Meisner is at Queen's Park.
The Ontario Medical Association will be covering a number of topics today, including sustainable public health measures to head off a third wave of COVID-19, how to deal with the variants, and vaccine delays and how that could affect herd immunity. The OMA wants even stricter measures built into the province's color-coded framework. Epidemiologist Dr. Fahad Razik says without vaccines, that's our best defense.
We're clearly at a tenuous point in the pandemic still. There isn't extensive vaccine coverage yet for the population, and we're still in the middle of wintertime, which enhances the spread of the virus.
Meantime, family doctors say they have nothing to tell their patients about the availability of vaccines. The Ontario College of Family Physicians says there's been no information about the booking system or vaccine sites from the Ministry of Health. Kevin Meisner, Queen's Park.
City News Time at 10:04. Now your forecast with meteorologist Jill Taylor.
For Ottawa, the Valley, and Smiths Falls today, periods of light snow, especially as we work through the latter part of the morning into the afternoon. A mild high near 2 degrees. Tonight, chance of flurries -2, and tomorrow, periods of snow, 5 centimeters possible. The high again about 2 degrees. For today, the high +2.
And right now in Ottawa, it's 0. It's 1 degree in Smiths Falls. American President Biden will hold his first bilateral meeting. Since being sworn in, he'll meet virtually today with Prime Minister Trudeau.
The two leaders have spoken by phone already, but this will be the first official meeting between Justin Trudeau and Joe Biden since Biden formally took office, even though they won't be in the same room. They're expected to speak about their shared visions on the environment and their differences, such as Biden's cancellation of the Keystone XL pipeline. Trudeau will be looking for help from Biden in securing the release from China of Canadian detainees Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor. Canada will also be seeking exemptions from protectionist measures that favor American contractors and suppliers for big U.S. infrastructure projects. Terry Pedro, The Canadian Press, Ottawa.
And Lanark OPP releasing a little more information on the snowmobile pedestrian collision in Carleton Place. A 49-year-old woman taken to hospital with serious injuries. She was struck by a snowmobile around 3:45 yesterday afternoon. A section of the trail between Franklin and Albert Street had to be closed for several hours for the investigation. Now the trail has reopened, but the investigation continues. I'm Andrew Boyle. For news anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
It's time to talk back
On the Rob Snow Show.
Have your say and call now.
613-750-1310.
Well, there's so much to choose from today. Where do you even begin? Where do you even begin? Well, we begin with you calling me. 750-1310, 750-1310, 613-750-1310. Email the Rob Snow Show at ottawa.citynews.ca. What is your reaction? For example, what is your reaction to what happened in what passes for the House of Commons these days? Yesterday, the vote was held. MPs declared unanimously, 266-0 on the main motion, declaring that China is committing genocide against the Uyghur population of China. 1 million people in these camps, 2 million people in these camps. I think the big part of the story is that the Prime Minister didn't show up. He wasn't on the record. He didn't vote. And his entire cabinet sat it out. Oh, save for Mark Garneau, who showed up and said, I abstain on behalf of the government of Canada. I abstain on behalf of the government of Canada. So the entire cabinet, the entire Liberal cabinet abstained. AWOL, MIA. What is your reaction to that at 750-1310, 750-1310? I mean, is some people call that shameful. That it's a shameful time, and Time will tell if the Trudeau Liberals are on the wrong side of history here with their behavior yesterday. And I would like to know what you think at 750-1310. On vaccines, did Canada cheap out? Gosh, you think of all the money that this government has spent. How else do you explain it? I mean, deficit of $400 billion, and that they're not done yet. But when it came to actually investing in the cutting edge research to actually have a made in Canada vaccine in a facility that could actually produce that vaccine, I think one of the stories that is unfolding this week is that Canada tried to do this on the cheap, and that may explain why we're paying the price right now in terms of our vaccine numbers, say, compared to our American colleagues and our British friends. According to witnesses testifying at a parliamentary committee this week, Canada cheaped out when it came to investing in made-in-Canada vaccine development and production. The actual research that it takes to move through the clinical trial process and get it approved by the regulator, and then to actually have a facility that can pump out millions of doses. We had a government that just didn't want to spend the money. And that's why the people involved in this business That's why they say we're way behind countries like the United States. We're way behind countries like the United Kingdom when it comes to vaccinating our citizens. It's one of the reasons. What's your reaction to that news? But here's the flip side. What if, let's say, the government invests, puts $1 billion into some company nobody's ever heard of before, and the vaccine doesn't work, and you've just blown $1 billion. Would you forgive the government then? You'd have to forgive the government then if you think it messed up in this approach. That's the flip side. But the fact is, most of the companies getting government money in Canada, they got a few $1 million. A few $1 million doesn't go very far when it comes to trying to develop a vaccine. A company like Moderna in the United States, it received $1 billion from the U.S. government. It had never made a vaccine before. It had never made a drug that had been approved by the FDA before. Didn't stop the U.S. government from putting $1 billion into that under Operation Warp Speed. Did we cheap out? 750-1310. And Adam Skelly, you had a lot to say about him back in the day. I'm trying to remember when that was. I want to say the fall. It seems like it was a fall, an autumn news story for me. He was the barbecue rebel from Etobicoke. We spent a whole week talking about that guy. You remember him, the owner of Adamson Barbecue, and he opened his dining room for his barbecue joint in defiance of the public health orders that banning indoor dining. Well, he has now been slapped with a bill from the city of Toronto for $187,000, including $165,000 for policing. You remember the police showed up and police on horseback were there. The mounted police, the Toronto Mounted Police Unit at the barbecue joint, $165,000. What do you think about this? Have a protest, get slapped with a bill because the police had to show up. Are you okay with that? Under the public health law, he has to pay the costs associated with that protest. Man, the city of Toronto obviously wants to make an example out of him. I'd like to know what you think about that. I'm not sure if I'm 100% aboard that particular decision right there. But let's go to the phone. 750-1310, 750-1310. Up first in Connecticut. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Rob. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. So
on what happened in the House of Commons yesterday, sir?
Yeah, so it's pretty disappointing that the Trudeau government abstained from the vote.
Yeah.
Unless I'm thinking that there's maybe some backroom negotiations going on for the two Michaels.
Yeah.
Maybe they don't want to irk the Chinese government, the communist government anymore, because, well, you read on the news that Chinese ambassador to Canada was, he was not putting off saying, leave us alone, blah, 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 whatever.
Yeah, stop meddling in our affairs and all of this kind of.
Exactly. I don't know, Rob, if you've driven by their compound on St. Patrick. It's a ominous looking place.
Yes, it's.
And I don't know, man. It's just like, I think that's the reason Trudeau probably abstained, because maybe there's some backroom deals to get the two Michaels out, because that should be our main priority right now,
Yeah, that is, that's pretty much the take from the columnists in the papers today, that it may have even been reckless, that it doesn't advance the cause of the two Michaels. That's certainly one side of the coin there, Khalid. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Honestly, Rob, if we didn't rely on China for all the cheap chunks that we buy, I wish we could, sanction them some other way, but we need them economically in a way, but we have to find a way to get them back in check, because they're just going unchecked right now,
Yep.
And that's one thing, that Trump was good for. I'll give him that. That's one thing he was good for. He was tough on China.
Yep.
And we got to find a way to keep them in check and get our two guys back.
Okay. Thank you, Khalid. Thank you. Thank you for your story. Yeah, the Liberal cabinet, including the Prime Minister, abstained yesterday. Prime Minister didn't vote. Didn't even bother to show up for the vote. Nor did any members of his cabinet, save one. The new foreign minister, Mark Garneau, abstained, quote, on behalf of the government of Canada. So what do you think of that? What do you think of that? How does that make you feel? How does that make you feel to know that? Orleans. Dave. Good morning, Dave.
Hey, you know what? The previous caller kind of stole my thunder, but I will just solidify my thought here.
Sure.
It's a geopolitical move. I think the Michaels are very close to coming home, and this was a deal. Okay, you don't speak out on this, and we're going to send your boys home. So, yeah, Khalid took my point of view, so you can continue on with that. Thanks for taking my call.
Okay, no problem. Okay, yeah. So the first two callers are, we want to get the two Michaels home, and a vote like this really doesn't help in that circumstance. That's one side of it. That's one side of it. You could credit the Liberal MPs who did show up, who did vote. They defied their boss, I guess. Right now, he doesn't have any appetite, Mr. Trudeau, to say anything or do anything that would upset the Chinese government, and that's why he whipped his cabinet into abstaining on behalf of the government of Canada. And the Bloc Amendment called on the government to lobby the IOC and move the Winter Games out of Beijing, the 2022 Winter Games. Not binding on the government. Government doesn't have to do anything in response to the passage of this motion. And let's face it, it's the Trudeau government, and it's China. So it's hard to imagine that the Prime Minister would do anything anyway. But what is your reaction to the vote in the House of Commons yesterday on China? Rob Snow Show, Talkback Hour, 750-1310. This is City News.
When you've lost your breasts, you've sort of lost part of yourself. And then all at once you're losing your hair. You don't know who you are anymore. You want to feel like yourself again. So I think that the store, a mastectomy store, is essential because you've lost your identity. And then all at once, you're looking for a wig, you need a headscarf, you need a camisole. There's nowhere to go. There's no one to talk to. This should be essential because there are more and more women that are getting breast cancer. I think it's 1 in 6. They're becoming younger. I have a client that's 18 years old. And where do they go? They need a place like this that the women that work there understand. They know what you're going through. It's changed quite a bit. Our hours are different. We're now open from 10 to 5. We're not as busy as we were. A lot of women are afraid to go out. They're afraid that maybe there are more people in the store. So that's why I try and let them know you are alone. There's absolutely nobody in the store except you and I. If there is a woman that she's very afraid, I will lock the door to make sure nobody else comes in. I'll put a sign back in 10-15 minutes just to give her that reassurance. Before we would have 4, 5, 6 people in the store. We didn't have to turn anybody away. Now we do. Some clients do leave and they're upset because they're in the store. They said, you know, we drove 20 minutes and now we're not allowed in the store. And I try to make them understand that there's somebody in here that's going through chemo or radiation. So that's sort of changed a lot, that we're not able to have more people in the store.
If we're talking about products, there's the bras that are adapted for mastectomy. The bathing suits that are adapted to mastectomy. We have special camisoles as well, and post-surgery bras. And then we have, for women going through chemo, the wigs that we have a big selection in the store as well. We have scarves. Some women don't feel comfortable wearing a wig. They prefer to wear a scarf or a hat, so we have a huge selection of that as well. We offer compression garments as well. When you're going through a mastectomy, you might have lymphedema in your arms after a couple of years, and you have flare-ups. So we have the sleeves, the hand as well that can be covered. We show each other's our scar. We talk about the treatments, how we felt, and I guess that's what they're looking for here. That's what makes us special. We have an added value in this store. Besides everything that's in the store, that's a product that can handle any problem that a client might have. Me and Linda, we've been through. We know how it feels in our bodies.
Hello. On the Rob Snow Show. The phone lines are open at 613-750-1310.
Now, the Rob Snow Show continues.
On the China vote yesterday, China's ambassador to Canada, not pleased, obviously, but so what? He says Canada is meddling in China's affairs and that the whole story about the Uyghurs is based on lies. China could, if it wanted to lay that to rest, could let in a group of, say, international observers into Xinjiang and let them see for themselves. Are these really vocational schools, as the Chinese government insists? But look, that's not going to happen. Look, when it came time to be on the record, okay, are you a yay or a nay? The Prime Minister didn't even show up to vote. And not a single member of the cabinet bothered to be on the record, okay? They all abstained. The backbench, Ibbotson in the Globe and Mail this morning says the backbench was in revolt. The big boss, Mr. Trudeau, his loyal cabinet ministers, they were in Nowheresville. They skipped it. They skipped the vote. This was a vote on where do you stand on the Chinese government's mistreatment of a religious minority. Okay? What do you think about that? I would like to know what you think about that. That's your government on your behalf. Nepean, Kevin, good morning.
Well, I really don't know. I don't know that much about the genocide that appears to be going on. So the vote on the genocide, I guess, Rob, is, I mean, the government did what they have to do, as far as I'm concerned. They had to abstain from that because they're the ones that have to deal with China. Now, as far as I heard people talking about the two Michaels, I understand, okay, yes, we're trying to get them home, but there's no way they're coming home until such time as they make a decision on the lady that we're supposedly harboring out in British Columbia. That may happen as a result of today. Maybe Justin and his conversation with Biden, maybe Biden will give them the green light that, yeah, we're not going to pursue her, so yeah, go ahead, send her home, and then the two Michaels will come home. That's kind of where I'm at. Sure,
I think you're putting it together very well. Yeah.
So that's a possibility. That's all I'm saying.
But at the same time, sir,
yes.
Let's face it. We're talking about the Trudeau government. They'd be tripping them all over themselves to pass a motion to declare a climate emergency. Right? Everybody want their 5 minutes on the record on that one. We are talking here. Let's be clear about what we're talking about here. We are talking about the mass detention of millions of people based on nothing more than their ethnicity, based on their religion. Absolutely. And we have politicians in this country, the people with the real power, okay? The cabinet ministers and the prime minister, they can't even summon the courage to log on to a Zoom call? What does that really say about our government's commitment to human rights? What does that really say about our government's commitment to human rights?
Well, it doesn't
really say very much, does it?
No, but it goes right back to why, again, what I said at the very beginning on why they've abstained and are not coming on it. Genocide is a big word. Now, and I don't know the implications of declaring a state or a country or whatever having committed genocide, how big of an impact that actually would have on the government's ability to be able to do anything in negotiating with that country. So that's kind of where I'm at with that.
Right.
And again, I don't know enough.
You think, I understand you. There's 3 calls now, and all along the same thing. The plight of the two Michaels, right? Kovrig and Spavor, more than 800 days now in a Chinese prison, kidnapped by the Chinese government in retaliation for the detention of the Huawei executive, right? That's the other side of the story. Does this really make it easier to secure their release? It doesn't, right?
No, it may not. But at the same token, by declaring them are people that are in power, that are the ones that have to do the negotiation. It's not the Conservatives. It's not the NDP that are going to stand there and have to do the negotiations with the Chinese government. It's unfortunately, and I don't like Trudeau, believe me, but unfortunately, that's our government that has to do that stuff. But on another note, if I could make one other comment completely off the subject at all, a really good topic. Wouldn't you like to be a fly on the wall listening to the conversation between Justin Trudeau and Joe Biden today?
Yeah. Sure. Yes, I would. Yes, I would. Yes, I would. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you. Yeah, sure. I'd like to tap into that one. Marie in the West End. Marie, Ottawa West.
Good morning, Rob.
Morning.
I thought yesterday was terrible.
Terrible.
The least they could have done was showed up for the vote.
Okay.
But let's go back a while back when Trudeau said, and we all know he said it, that he admired China. Well, you know what? I think he's proving that more and more every day. Yes, I want the two Michaels to come home as much as we pray for them every day. But, you know, there's also people out there that because of their religious stat, they're being killed. Or they're being put into camps where they're hard labor. They probably say they're
slave labor, brainwashing, abortion, forced sterilization, all of these things, right?
And yesterday too, if you watched the vote, I'm sure you did. I was so proud of all the Liberal MPs, but Mark Garneau, he was put there. They probably said, okay, Mark, you go out and this is what you say, at least.
You're our point person on this one.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. No, Trudeau is at least let's get rid of this guy. This is not just one thing. I mean, look what we've been through with the we and the this and the that. I mean, is this the kind of a government this can...
The we and the this and the that. That about sums it up. Yeah. Okay, Marie, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, fair enough. The other side of the story, and look, is the Michaels, right? Kovrig and Spavor. And there is a feeling out there this morning, I've heard it already, we shouldn't upset the Chinese government right now. It's just going to make it more difficult to secure the release of Kovrig and Spavor. So what are you to do? What? As a government? Do you go along to get along? We shouldn't. The motion passed in the end. Okay? It passed. Don't forget that. The motion passed and it passed. With or without Trudeau, passed unanimously. Trudeau's, in the end, he is an MP, just not like the rest of them. 266-0. I mean, you find me another issue that sees Conservatives, New Democrats, Blocs, backbench Liberals all agree. They did on this one. But the people with the real power weren't there. They sat it out. And I'd like to know what you think about that. Diane. Good morning, Diane in Sitson.
Good morning, Rob.
Yeah.
So we've had 800 days to bring the Michaels home. I think what happened yesterday is, using Hillary Clinton's word, deplorable. I think Trudeau is a coward.
Okay.
I think that he should have done what was right.
Yep.
I liked Professor Lee. I just don't agree with everything he said today.
Okay.
Yes, Myanmar is a main problem. It's in the paper today of some of them from Myanmar that are in the boats, dying in the boats. I know what's happened in Nigeria. We did take a stand with Russia during the Olympics. I think it was around 1980. We didn't send our athletes there.
Because of the invasion of Afghanistan.
And so, yes, and the Liberal Cutler, he's been on.
Cutler, yeah.
And he says it's genocide.
Yes, Erwin Cutler,
Ray probably thinks it's genocide as well. So I don't agree with your other callers. I think, no.
Good.
Not at all.
Thank you, Diane. Thank you for your call. Halftime Talkback Hour, 750-1310. Back after the news on City News.
In Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Tuesday, February 23rd. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in both Ottawa and Smiths Falls, it's 1 degree. Here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. We have the latest numbers from the province on new COVID cases. 975 of them province-wide from just over 26,000 tests that were finished. In the hotspots, 343 cases in Toronto, 186 in Peel. Now, locally, there were 18 new cases in Ottawa, 2 in both Renfrew and the Eastern Ontario Health Unit. There were no new cases today reported in Leeds, Grenville, Lanark. Education workers should be prioritized for COVID vaccinations. A letter from the Ottawa Carleton Public Board is asking the province to put education workers on the priority list. That's for the safety of staff as well as students as the province fights COVID-19 infection. Now, doctors will be adding their pressure on COVID vaccination programs and other concerns surrounding COVID to the province today as well. Ontario Medical Association says stricter measures should be built into the color-coded system being used to gradually reopen our province. It also wants the Ministry of Health to provide more information about vaccination sites and that priority list for those to get the shot. A 49-year-old woman was the pedestrian who was struck by a snowmobile on the Ottawa Valley Recreation Trail yesterday afternoon. Lanark paramedics transported the woman with serious injuries to hospital. The OPP continue to investigate. City News Time, 10:32. I'm Andrew Boyle. For news anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
It's time to talk back
on the Rob Snow Show.
Have your say and call now.
613-750-1310.
Just very quickly, the question period's underway in the Ontario legislature. And the line of questioning today is dealing
the South African variant, the Brazilian
with vaccines.
I'm sure that there will be others, but the emergency brake has been applied, and it's applied on the basis of the number of cases that are out there, the ability of public health to be able to respond in a timely manner, the ability of our hospitals to be able to deal with people with COVID and with other issues, and the level of variance. And we've seen the brake be applied even this past week with having both Peel and Toronto remain with the stay-at-home orders because of the variants and other issues that they're trying to deal with, as well as in North Bay, which otherwise would have been in green, but because of the variants of concern and the concern about them escalating, has remained at the stay-at-home order for the safety of the people in the North Bay area.
Thank you. The supplementary question.
Speaker, I'm not sure if the Minister of Health noticed the news last night, but people are flocking to the malls in places like York Region. It seems to me that the message the government's trying to send is really not getting through. Most experts have actually said that by the time the government gets to implementing an emergency brake, it'll be far too late. Fearfully, that's what might be happening as we speak. In fact, Dr. Michael Warner said this, quote, "Instead of waiting until we have a critical number of people vaccinated first, the Ontario government has jumped the gun because they have not put in place proper measures to prevent the spread of COVID-19. When you see people flocking to the mall, Speaker, when you see the fact that our caseloads are no longer falling, the question that we have for the government is this claim of caution is not holding water. Why is this government jumping the gun when it comes to the opening?
That's good. That's good. Jumping the gun. You're jumping the gun. And what is the emergency brake? And this is the line of questioning from Andrea Horvath, the NDP leader today. I did see some pictures, and we talked about this yesterday. You know, Toronto and Peel are still on lockdown essentially until March 8th, but York Region is opening up just the tiniest little bit. And I don't know about you, David. I did see some pictures on social media yesterday, some videos, particularly of a HomeSense store in York Region.
That seems to have been the culprit.
Everybody went to HomeSense.
45-minute wait just to check out.
You need a bath mat or something? What is going on with HomeSense?
Planning renos during the lockdown.
I guess so, yeah. We're also talking this morning, the Talkback Hour, about the vote that happened in the House of Commons yesterday, declaring that China is committing genocide against the Uyghurs. And the cabinet did not vote. The prime minister did not vote. They abstained. And some people say that's shameful. And then that those liberal cabinet ministers and the prime minister should feel a sense of shame. And they've shamed the country, and they've laid to rest any notion that they really do care about the plight of minorities, religious persecution, fundamental human rights. If they believed in any of that, wouldn't they vote for this motion? What does it say when you don't even show up and, it's your turn to be on the record and you're nowhere to be found? Talking about the mass detention of millions of people based on their background, their ethnicity, their religion, and they're nowhere. They're nowhere. Now, whipping cabinet votes has happened before. It's a rarity, okay? MPs, what happened yesterday? Kind of a rarity. MPs on the government side basically having a free vote, siding with the opposition in an opposition motion. Cabinet whipped, though, in this case. That's happened before. Something similar happened in 1990. The last time there was a vote in the House of Commons on regulating abortion. There was a bill that would have regulated abortion. It was a free vote, but Brian Mulroney whipped his cabinet, and the final vote was 140 to 131. And then it passed through the House, and the bill went to the Senate, and the senators had a free vote, and it ended up in a tie, 43 to 43. And when there's a tie, the bill is defeated, and that was 1990, and it was the last time a Canadian government dared to even try to pass a law regulating abortion. And in this country now we have no law. But this motion passed yesterday on the Uyghur genocide. Shouldn't forget that. Doesn't force the government to do anything. And about 80 Liberal MPs voted with the opposition colleagues. It must have killed them to do it, but they did it. But where the real power is in our political system, well, that rests with the prime minister and with his cabinet ministers, and they were nowhere on the question of genocide. They were nowhere. What is your reaction to that? And in addition to that, there's a story. Toronto Star has a story. 680 News, our sister station in Toronto, has the story. You remember the Adamson barbecue guy?
Hello, Adamson barbecue fans.
That guy, freedom, right? Freedom. One spare rib at a time. The Great Barbecue Revolt, right? Remember that guy, Adam Skelly? He's back in the news. He was billed by the city of Toronto for the protests that happened there. Barbecue joint. He opened his restaurant, the dining room part, in defiance of the lockdown orders. Quite the scene there for a few days. He was eventually hauled away in handcuffs. Some of you thought that's what he wanted all along. He wanted to be on the news. He's like a martyr to the cause of slow-cooked meat. Anyway, he opened for 3 days against the public health orders, and the police were there. The bylaw were there. A locksmith was there. Health and safety inspectors were there. The whole shebang of city enforcement, they were all there, and now he has to pay for all of that. And it's $187,000, and it's $165,000 just for the police. Just for the police. Quoting in the Star today, Toronto Star, the city is seeking to recoup its cost to enforce provincial public health regulations that has spent closing and keeping closed this Etobicoke restaurant under the Ministry of Health orders, a spokesperson for the city said in an email. This includes the cost of staffing police, which made up the bulk of the bill at $165,000, as well as public health, licensing staff, boarding up the premises, and the cost of a locksmith. So the police showed up, and they sent him the bill for that, and it's $165,000. What do you think about that? Now, the Toronto Star has a story, and it quotes two lawyers. One of the lawyers doesn't see a problem with it and says, what's the point of having a law if you're not going to enforce it? And recouping the costs of policing is part of it. The health board closed the businesses because of an infectious disease pandemic, and he opened, defying the Health Protection and Promotion Act of 1990. Police were there for 3 days. The law says the health board can go after the offending party for costs, and that's what they're doing. And one lawyer doesn't have a problem with it, and the other lawyer does. Says that there is a collective interest in not penalizing protesters in such a heavy-handed way, and, quote, it's worth questioning whether invoicing like this is a tool to suppress protest. And I think that's a key question. Sending people the bill to police a protest is a pretty convenient way for a municipal government, a provincial government, a federal government to suppress a protest, isn't it? I think that's a really interesting question. $165,000 for 3 days to police a protest outside a barbecue joint? He has until the end of the year to pay it. Let's get back to the phones here. Serge, what do you think about that, Serge?
Well, I'm going to give you a bit of history.
All right.
Do you remember the guy in Carlsbad Spring who was charged for having butchered a pig in his garage?
Sure, yeah.
He was charged $100,000 in fines.
Oh.
And over a 2-year period, the ministry, the M&R, whittled it down to $1,000 so long as he pleaded guilty.
Oh, okay. All right.
And he fought it. He said, no. He continued fighting it. And then all of a sudden, M&R tried to drop the issue. And I was there when the judge forced the Crown to come down from Toronto and explain why all of a sudden they were withdrawing the charges. And the Crown said, well, we didn't think that Mr. Tyson would raise constitutional questions. And that's why they withdraw the charge.
Okay.
So Adamson is now raising a constitutional argument. In his press conference, he explains it. And he's very confident that he's going to win it. And I believe he will win it also. Because
So you think, you would predict this idea is going to have to pay $165,000 for the police to be there for 3 days. You don't think he'll end up having to pay that at all? You know that?
I believe he'll win the whole thing down.
Okay, well, we'll
carry
see.
it through.
Yeah.
When they get into court, they might just drop the charge.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Okay. Thanks, Serge. He's been on the front lines of battles like these. You have a restaurant owner. He's ordered under a public health order, you have to close your dining room, infectious disease pandemic. So what he did was against the law. Other people could say he was protesting a law that he disagreed with, and he can do that in a free country, right? The city of Toronto is saying he was putting the broader community at risk, and it's right in the language of the bill that if you do that, we can recoup our costs for intervening there. $187,000 in all. This lawyer makes a very good point that the city, or if you will, the state, gosh, what a convenient way to wield your authority, right? And silence legitimate protest. Yeah, if we have to send the police out to your protest, you might get a bill for $100,000 or so. I think that's a very interesting question to explore. Maybe not today, maybe some other day. Oh, not that one. Just hold on a second, David. I've messed up here. I want to take Roger's call. Roger, good morning.
Good morning, Rob.
Yes, Roger, go ahead.
Yeah, I want to talk about the vote yesterday.
Yes. In the House. Go ahead, Roger. Oh, sorry.
I tried to stay calm, Rob. I don't know why we're getting a bit of static here. But anyways, no, I think that the House did a proper job, and Justin Trudeau and the cabinet ministers, like that lady said there before the news, she took away a bit of my thunder, but they're nothing but cowards, and they proved it time and time again. Rob, before the start of the Second World War, when Hitler started to decide he wanted to have the solution for the Jewish people, and he slowly started taking away their rights, and then before you know it, they end up going into the gas chambers. I'm not saying this is what the Chinese are doing, but when you start to sterilize women, and what are they going to do next? Castrate the men and put them in these intern camps. I mean, their culture is a rich culture, and anybody that can sit there and say that the Chinese are not trying to genocide these people, Canada stood for tyranny for hundreds, for most of their history, Rob. Before the start of the Second World War, the Japanese went in there and killed 50 million Chinese, trying to wipe them out. And of course, there was a stop put to that. And something, Rob, those two Michaels and then those two other men that are in being detained too. And it's a sad thing for me to say, but I'm going to be honest. During whether it's tragedies, wars, whatever, sometimes it's a sacrifice, or a few people are made for the better good. And those four people are not going to define the nation. And a government like Chinese government, where they continue to bully, that's what they are, the schoolyard bully. And the more you give in to them, the more they want. And before you know it, they destroy you.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Roger. Thank you. He's not impressed at all with what happened in the House yesterday. A lot of people feel like that. It's not unanimous. It's not unanimous like it was in the House yesterday. Well, with the exception of the Prime Minister and the Cabinet. We'll be back with the final quarter here. Rob Snow Show, Talkback Hour, City News, 750-1310.
No Nut Butter is a business where we make allergy-friendly spreads, so alternatives to peanut butter, Nutella, or those kind of things that kids and adults like to have on toast or on a banana or on an apple, and aren't really available to people with severe food allergies or allergies to the top allergens. When you're an allergy parent, you read every label because you need to know the details of every ingredient that's in the products that you're going to feed your kid. So we found that a lot of the products that we were looking at had may contain warnings, which we can't have, and had just so many ingredients in them that you don't know if there's a weird unknown ingredient that is kind of disguised under a different name. So we started No Nut Butter so that we would have the opportunity to have products that were safe and free from the top allergens and had really simple ingredients in them so that you would know exactly what you were feeding your kids. We make 4 different products at No Nut Butter. So we make a pumpkin seed butter, which is our alternative to peanut butter. So it only has pumpkin seeds, roasted pumpkin seeds, and some kind of oil in it. So we usually use corn oil or olive oil. And then we make what we call Choco Pumpkin, and it is our alternative to a chocolate hazelnut spread. So it is our pumpkin seed butter with our chocolate spread, so very much chocolate hazelnut spread. We make a coconut caramel, so it is coconut milk and sugar, and it is our kind of vegan option for caramel, because typically caramel has lots of butter and dairy in it. And then we make an apple butter, which is apples and cinnamon and sugar, and that's it. We do also make a sugar-free pumpkin seed butter option because we have some diabetics and just some people who don't want sugar in their lives, and so we do offer that, but you'd have to custom order it. There are very strict rules around producing products, particularly nut-free products. You aren't allowed to cook in your own kitchen, which makes a lot of sense. If you have a dog, you don't want to cook in your own kitchen. But from a nut standpoint, it's just making sure that you have everything really clean and organized. So we cook all of our products in a commercial kitchen so that we can keep all of those health and safety procedures really tight and together. My personal business started a company called Shop Local Ontario during the pandemic, so we were pretty well equipped to go forward into the pandemic in a world of e-commerce and transacting online. You can find us online at nonutbutter.com, or you can find us on Facebook, No Nut Butter, or on Instagram at No Nut Butter.
On the Rob Snow Show. The phone lines are open at 613-750-1310.
Now, the Rob Snow Show continues.
Final quarter, talking about the vote that happened in the House of Commons. That's kind of dominated the talkback hour. The vote on genocide, declaring that what China is doing is a genocide against the Uyghur Muslim minority in China. Joanne, Orleans, good morning.
Good morning, Rob.
Yeah, hi there.
So I want to talk about the vote in the House of Commons.
Go ahead.
To me, one key question in diplomacy really is the confidence the people have in the government conducting it. And I think the Liberals, old school Chrétien Liberals and new Justin Trudeau Liberals, have shown that they're really economically intertwined with the Chinese government and the country of China. I don't believe that they have Canada's national interests at heart. I really believe they have their economic interests at heart. And it's holding them back from properly representing our country and our best interests. I think that we have to remember the whole situation is based on national security, not necessarily our own, but the U.S. and Huawei. And we detained that CEO, and the Chinese retaliated. I completely disagree with Professor Ian Lee. I was quite shocked that he was comparing China as one among many, of developing nations. I think that's an extraordinary whitewash. China's not just looking out for its own corrupt self. It's got tentacles around the world, in Africa, obviously in Canada and elsewhere. And it has very strong international ambitions. We know they're the intellectual property, they're the number one thief. There's a lot of reasons to be very, very cautious and freeze out China. So did the Conservatives sabotage our diplomacy? I think no more than the long-term Liberal interests have sabotaged our diplomacy. And if Justin Trudeau really wanted to inspire confidence and look like he had the situation in hand, why didn't he take a page out of Joe Clark's book when the Americans were being hidden in the Canadian embassy, and Joe Clark crossed the floor and spoke to Opposition Leader Trudeau at the time to inform him of what was going on. And you can see in this gentleman encounter, regardless of what you think of them, that there was a moment where Joe Clark was taking the national best interests of the country, two countries, and this gentleman's agreement of, okay, we may criticize something else, at another time, but not this, not now.
Okay, yeah.
So I just feel that is where all Canadians could have grown in trust in how Justin was going to represent us. It's a sad situation, and I don't trust Trudeau. I don't know if the Conservatives have sabotaged it, but there was another way to handle it.
Okay, thank you, Joanne, for your vote this morning. John. Good morning, John, on the China vote.
Good morning, Rob.
Oh, yeah, you're in Texas, right? How's the weather today?
The weather is, it's a little hazy still. We had morning fog, but it's lifted. Okay. It's about 70 degrees, I guess.
70 degrees, okay.
Yeah,
that's better than last week, yeah.
Yeah, it's bizarre.
Yes, that's good.
Anyway.
Yeah.
That excellent call, your last caller, covered a lot of my points, so I'll be short.
Okay.
Is Trudeau's cabinet actually 87 people, or that's how many people appeared not to have voted on this? 266 out of 338 or 82, something like that.
Okay. I haven't actually run the numbers, but no, he doesn't have an 87-member cabinet. It's a big... It's
71. 71.
Okay. Yeah.
338 minus 266 minus Garneau would make it 71.
Okay. Yeah.
And
okay.
I saw Jagmeet Singh stop waffling and voted yay. So that's good.
Okay. Okay. Now the flip side that's kind of come out this morning, John, is that it may damage the opportunity to get the two Michaels out of China. What do you think about that?
It may, and that's really unfortunate.
Okay.
I don't know what can be done about that. I don't know why it's taking such a long time to process Meng Wanzhou through our court system and let the Americans have her.
Okay.
It
has to be processed through the court system to find out if the Americans can actually get her. That's the thing. That's why we're having these court cases to begin with, right? So.
Yeah, but I don't know why it's taking so long to go through the court.
Well,
it shouldn't. Like give it priority.
Yeah, but expedited, in other words. Yeah, sure. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, John.
So
thank you.
That's one thing.
Yeah, I think John.
Wait.
No,
Joe Biden.
Joe Biden, yeah.
Town hall meeting on CNO with Anderson Cooper. It went so badly. Their CNN claims they're fact checking it on at least 4 things he said, but in essence, he said he's not going to call out the Chinese on the Uyghur situation because it is part of their cultural norm.
Oh, okay. I did not see that. Thank you. I will look for that. Thank you, John. Thank you. A bit of I think John's got a VoIP phone. By the sounds of it, that's what my VoIP phone sounds like. So, still ahead, we have a very busy final hour of the program coming up for you. Let me call it up here. Yeah. I was wondering what was going on with the butter in my house, and it turns out I'm not the only one. Okay, our house is like, the inside. This will be
the first official meeting between Justin.
21 degrees. The butter in our house, it seems to stay hard. Even though you take it out and you try to soften it so you can actually spread it on your toast in the morning without ripping the bread apart. It's very frustrating when the hard butter. Anyway, it turns out this is turned into a major story because a lot of people are using a lot more butter because of they're staying home and there's the baking craze is on, right? I mean, every day Andrew Boyle is coming in. He's got like a dozen muffins for everybody of every conceivable variety. Butter, it ain't what it used to be, and apparently the reason is palm oil. They're like dietary supplements are being fed to dairy cows, and this, some believe, is the reason why your butter will not become soft at room temperature, that the butter is harder than it used to be. And the Quebec Dairy Board is investigating, and we're going to speak to one of the top experts in the country about butter coming up. Yeah, we do it all here on this program. We go from diplomacy and geopolitics into why won't your butter be soft at room temperature. Sylvain Charlebois is a professor in food distribution and policy at Dalhousie University in Halifax, and I'm really looking forward to this. Elon Musk has, I think it's called Starlink, the Elon Musk company, launching all the satellites. He wants to bring the internet to the masses via the latest, greatest space technology. We're also doing that here in Ottawa. We're way deep into the space race. The internet space race. The company is Telesat. It's one of the oldest tech companies in Ottawa, 50 years old. And it is going to set up a $400 million satellite operation in Gatineau. It's going to create hundreds of jobs, 600 jobs. And it's called the Lightspeed Satellite Internet Network. And we're going to speak with the director of LEO Systems Engineering at Telesat. LEO is Low Earth Orbit. Coming up, final hour, Rob Snow Show, City News.
local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Tuesday, February 23rd. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in both Ottawa and Smiths Falls, it's 1 degree, and here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. Ottawa Carleton School Board has sent a letter to the provincial government concerning education worker vaccinations. The chair, Lynn Scott, is asking Health Minister Christine Elliott and Education Minister Stephen Lecce for education workers to be prioritized in the public vaccination plan. Scott says education workers have been tireless in their effort to support safe operation of schools. Having them vaccinated would ensure staff is safe for those supporting the high-needs students. The board is asking the ministers to make a formal public statement acknowledging priority education workers should receive. The latest COVID case numbers have been released by the province this morning, 975 new cases. And these come from about 26,000 tests that were completed. There have also been 12 more deaths in Ontario. Locally, there are 18 new cases in Ottawa, 2 in both Renfrew and the Eastern Ontario Health Unit. No new cases in Leeds, Grenville, and Lanark. In the hotspots, there are 343 new cases today in Toronto, 186 new cases in Peel. City News Time, 11:02, and now your forecast with meteorologist Jill Taylor.
For Ottawa, the Valley, and Smiths Falls today, periods of light snow, especially as we work through the latter part of the morning into the afternoon. A mild high near 2 degrees. Tonight, chance of flurries -2, and tomorrow, periods of snow, 5 centimeters possible. The high again about 2 degrees. For today, the high +2.
And right now in both Ottawa and Smiths Falls, it's 1 degree. A person who took a rideshare with 6 others on February 16th from Toronto to Ottawa has tested positive for COVID. Ottawa Public Health is following up with close contacts of the person who did test positive, as well as tracking other people in that car. OPH says if they can't identify the close contact of the person who tested positive, a public release may be issued to reach them. The health unit says the 6 people traveled in a white van from Yorkdale Shopping Centre around 1 in the afternoon, arriving in Ottawa around 6 and dropping off passengers at both Bayshore and Saint Laurent Centre. If you were in the vehicle, you're asked to contact Ottawa Public Health. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and U.S. President Joe Biden will hold a formal meeting later today, the first official bilateral meeting for Biden since taking office.
A fact sheet released earlier today by the White House describes plans for this meeting to set out a roadmap for Canada-U.S. relations. Colin Robertson, a former Canadian diplomat who was posted in the U.S., tells me this roadmap will set out goals in areas of mutual interest.
Trade, economic, the border and security, climate, energy, and the environment.
However, it's not clear if this plan will include some of Canada's priorities heading into this meeting, such as procuring more COVID-19 vaccine doses, freeing Michael Spavor and Michael Kovrig from China, or securing an exemption to Biden's Buy American policy. The meeting today will begin with Biden and Trudeau speaking virtually one-on-one before it expands to include the cabinets of both governments. Cormac McSweeney, Parliament Hill.
City News Time, 11:04. The latest premier to be sworn in had that honor this morning. Ian Rankin paid tribute to his predecessor, Stephen McNeil, in Nova Scotia this morning as he was sworn in as the new premier. The lieutenant governor of the province swore in Rankin's 17-member cabinet at the Halifax Convention Centre during a ceremony that was dramatically scaled back due to COVID-19 protocols. I'm Andrew Boyle. For News Anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Firm.
Fair.
Fun.
The Rob Snow Show returns
On Rogers TV and City News, 101.1 FM.
and 1310 AM.
Is your butter harder? Failing to get soft at room temperature? Let's explore this issue. A lot of people are interested in it. Sylvain Charlebois joins me now from Dalhousie University, where he is a professor in food distribution and policy. Good morning, Professor.
Good morning.
Why is the butter not getting soft at room temperature? What's the problem? This is a major scandal. No.
Have you noticed?
I have noticed. Yes, I have noticed. Yes.
You have?
Yes, I have.
Me
yes.
too.
You have. Okay. Yes, I have. Yeah.
Since August, I've been receiving emails, phone calls from friends saying, asking me, "Have you noticed something's different with butter?" I didn't believe it first, but what alerted me to this issue is this memo that was posted by the British Columbia Dairy Board in October 19th, and the memo is actually still posted. And it mentions a non-foaming problem with milk, and also it talks about free fatty acids. That's when I started to make some phone calls and talk to agrologists, people in the industry, leaders in the dairy industry, asking them what's going on, and more and more as I was going through conversations with different folks, I realized that something was really wrong, and of course there are several hypotheses as to why this is happening, but the one thing that came up frequently is this whole issue of animal feed and
what goes in must come out, right? So
that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, what are the cows eating that maybe they didn't used to eat?
Well, actually, they've been using the dairy industry has been using legally, by the way, palmatic acids, palm oil, and it's been going on for more than a decade. And there's palm oil in many different food products, and so the problem that the industry was facing is that last year demand for butter, for example, went up 12.4% in a year because we've been cooking a lot more.
Yeah, a lot of cooking, a lot of baking, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the pressure was on to produce more fat. The money in dairy is not necessarily with milk; it's really with fat. And so the a couple of ways you can actually increase your fat output as a dairy farmer is to get more cows in the barn, of course. That's very costly, and it takes time to actually get a cow to lactate.
Oh, sure.
And secondly, the other way
a good dairy cow is very expensive.
Very expensive, absolutely.
Yeah.
And the other way to do it is to actually increase the amount of palmatic acids you give to cows. So it will increase the amount of butterfat produced. The problem with palmatic acids, and it's been documented quite a bit, is that it does increase the content of saturated fats in butterfat. And so for any finished product made with that butterfat, it will increase the fusion point. So it will take longer to melt. You will have to melt your product at a higher temperature, and that's what's going on with butter right now.
Yeah, it's very interesting. So I'm assuming this palm oil is probably given as some sort of feed supplement, probably marketed by industry, right? In the agriculture industry, right? Something
exactly. Like that. And so that's really the one concern that we have. Of course, we can't really know for sure this is the culprit, this is the reason why, but a lot of scientists are starting to wonder, well, maybe this is it. And if there is one thing that has changed in animal science related to dairy in the last couple of years, is certainly demand for palmatic acids. And as they were using more palmatic acids, people were starting to notice that butter was getting harder and tasteless and with no smell.
Right.
I would challenge your listeners to go out and buy organic butter. If you're still skeptical, go out and buy organic butter. Go home, put 2 toasts in a toaster, take them out, butter one with regular butter, and the other one with organic. The difference is stunning.
The difference being, well, how would you notice the difference?
The organic one will melt.
It will melt.
How it spreads, it's much smoother.
Right. Okay.
The regular one, it doesn't spread as easily. You'll basically destroy your toast, really.
I know. That's what's so frustrating right now. Yeah,
I know.
Yeah.
I know. And so that's the one thing. And the other thing that really I didn't expect is the smell. I don't buy any organic anything ever.
Right.
We have 4 kids. We can't afford it. But this one time I needed to prove to myself something was wrong. So I actually just tried, and I realized organic butter actually smelled like butter.
Right. I wonder if there could be, I mean, we're talking about this because it's a spread, but could this, I wonder, affect the finished product of other dairy products, whether that's cottage cheese or yogurt or cheese or what have you, heavy cream or what have you, right? So.
They are. I mean, I spoke to some cheese makers, and they also have noticed that there is a difference in the texture of cheese. Baristas will tell you that they're having a harder time making foam with milk as well. So all of these things are really pointing to ingredients, and of course, ingredients come from dairy farms. Now, it doesn't exclude that maybe something has gone on in processing, but I spoke to a lot of processors, and they haven't reported anything different going on in processing in particular.
Okay. Your column in the Globe and Mail this week is headlined, "The Dairy Industry's Use of Palm Oil Breaches Its Moral Contract with Canadians." Well, why is this the breaching of a moral contract with Canadians, Professor?
Well, a lot of people are saying, well, palm oil is in everything. Most dairy farmers around the world are using palm oil. Well, yes, but it's not Canada. In Canada, we first have a government-sanctioned quota system.
Right.
That's one thing, which is
supply management.
By the way.
Yep. Supply management.
Yeah. Yep.
Yep.
We have tariffs, high tariffs on imports, so it's a very closed system.
Yep.
Only the privileged few are allowed to produce milk and butter fat in Canada. Secondly, we're giving $1.75 billion to dairy farmers over the next 3 years to actually allow them to produce the quality milk and fat we need. Thirdly, we're paying a lot for butter compared to the U.S., 3 times the price on average. Butter is very expensive in Canada compared to the U.S. We've all agreed to this implicitly, only to expect high-quality products, a sustainable, natural, local product.
Well, in fact, the dairy farmers of Canada, and I know some dairy farmers personally, God bless them, they never take a day off. They milk cows twice a day.
That's right.
Right, very hard job. And they're great people. But they would say, we make the finest product in the world, right? We make the finest product in the world, is what they would say. So
if you go back to the article in Globe and Mail and go down and look at all the comments left by readers, you're going to feel the anger. I mean, a lot of people feel betrayed just because they've been told for many years they get the highest quality milk, highest quality butter, butter fat, only to realize that dairy farmers are procuring an ingredient from elsewhere around the world. It's not coming from Canada. They're importing it.
Where do you get palm oil? Where does palm oil come from?
Brazil, Asia, depending.
Right.
Depending of your supplier, but suppliers are selling this, and of course they're very upset when this news came out because they're being challenged by consumers saying this is not acceptable. A lot of consumers have been avoiding palm oil in their diets only to learn that they weren't, because they were eating dairy products.
Yeah. So it's very interesting. What do you think should happen now? It seems as though at least the Quebec Dairy Board is going to have an investigation.
Yeah, and so will the Dairy Farmers of Canada. They've announced that they've created a committee, which is great. I think it's good news. A couple of things need to happen, I think. One, we need to do a better job connecting animal science with food science. In other words, if we decide to feed our animals certain ways, how will those practices impact the quality of products at retail? And not only that, how will the quality of food products at retail impact our own health as consumers? There's basically no studies on this. Zero. Right. That's one thing. The second thing is transparency. Boards need to show transparency and explain to the Canadian public what is going on dairy farms these days, because they're pretty much clueless, and that's why I think it's coming. This news is coming out as a shock to most Canadians.
Okay. Thank you, Professor Charlebois. Nice to hear from you, sir.
My pleasure.
Yeah, Professor Food Distribution Policy, Dalhousie University in Halifax, on Buttergate. 11:15. Rob Snow Show, City News.
Papa Jack was started 14 years ago, really by accident more than anything. A friend of mine had bought a grocery store. A popcorn machine was in there. He didn't want it. I ended up by buying it. My family thought I was nuts. When I first said, come and pick up this popcorn machine, my son said, what the heck for? I won't use exact words. But anyway, we started, and it just kept on growing and growing. But at the time, I was the only one selling popcorn in Ottawa. But we persevered as a family, and here we are. So it's been very, very rewarding for my family and myself. And to see our brand name, Papa Jack, and Papa Jack came out of, I wanted something that was going to be very bilingual. So Papa, and then in Ontario, everybody called me Jack, even though my name is Jacques. In Quebec, it's fine, it's Jacques, but in Ontario, it was always Jack. So we married the two together, Papa, Jack. With the store that we have on Thurston Drive, it basically, the factory's in the back. If you come into the store, you can see how the popcorn is being made during the week. So it adds an extra layer of, you can see the sanitation, you can see how we do it. It's not like making popcorn. Most people thought when I started this, I was making popcorn in my garage or in my basement. No, never did. It was started in this building, in the back of the building, and then we kept growing and growing until what we have now. My daughter and my son came up with a brilliant idea to do a fundraiser online. So basically all people have to do is to register here, and we give them a special code number. And with that code number, they tell their friends or their neighbors, everybody, to buy online from us with that code number. And then at the end of each period, could be 2 weeks, could be a month, then we'll pay them a 20% of all the businesses that we got through that code number. One thing I'd like to say is thank you to all the Ottawa people who have supported us and support local businesses. Sometimes people, they talk about buying locally. Now it becomes that much more important to buy locally, to support your local businesses, because not too many of them are going to survive this. We're fortunate that we're so far so good.
Community opinion.
The Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM
and 1310 AM.
An Ottawa program that matches people who have difficulty entering the workforce with jobs will train up to 120 personal support workers just in the next 10 months. It's called the Earn As You Learn program, and it's run by Pinecrest-Queensway Community Health Center. And Rhonda Beauregard, Manager Employment Programs at Pinecrest-Queensway Community Health Center, joins me this morning here on City News. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
No, thank you for taking the time. It's a great pleasure. What is the Earn As You Learn program?
The Earn As You Learn program is a program that is going to be training 120 individuals who are furthest from the labor market as personal support workers over the next, our goal is to have this all done by the end of December 2021.
Wow. So what kind of background would these individuals have, for example?
Well, it's there is a priority that is being given to individuals, as I said, who are furthest from the labor market. So, for example, those would be individuals who are unemployed at this point, individuals who may be residing in a low-income household, they may have a poor employment history, or have been unable to access employment due to a number of other barriers to employment.
Okay.
So really we're looking for those individuals so that we can help them to gain some meaningful work.
Okay. So how do you do that? I'd like some insight into this. Someone who has, say, a spotty history of employment, for example. How do you train someone like that to be a personal support worker in 10 months? How do you do that? How do you go about doing that?
Well, what is really unique about this program, and I think it's pretty unique in general to what we do at Pinecrest-Queensway Community Health Centre, is that we do work often with individuals who are furthest from services in all the programs that we offer. So in this particular program, we're offering a full wraparound support to the individual. So we're looking at working with individuals that are having barriers to employment, and we're pairing them with an employment counselor, and the employment counselor is able to help provide some supports, get a really good understanding of what barriers that an individual may be facing to employment, and then really looking at creating those wraparound supports. So, for example, we talked a little bit about employment counseling, but there would be referrals to things like literacy and basic skills, linkages to support networks such as childcare, housing stability. If there's need any help in getting access to technology, assistance with transportation costs, uniforms, medical exams, all of those types of things. It's providing that one-on-one support, and it's also providing follow-up with those individuals for a year after they're graduating from the personal support worker program.
I see. Okay, so there's follow-up afterwards, right? Okay.
There is follow-up, yeah.
So how long has this program been around? Is this a new thing, or...?
Well, this program is actually just starting. So we just received funding for that. So we're recruiting for our first cohort. But we're also in this program with a number of different partners. So we have worked diligently. I think it was in the fall. We were in the fall of 2019, actually. We worked very closely with a number of employers, and employers were coming to us and expressing that they really needed some support with personal support workers.
Okay.
And we were unable to find individuals to help connect with them who were certified as personal support workers. So we started having conversations around that need, and then we started having conversations with our college partners about how can we train individuals. So this project really was a good development with our employer partners and with our college partners, and also we brought in literacy and basic skills to help support this. So we built this really, really good foundation to wrap around the client in order to be able to support them and move forward in that. So we've been working for a while in building that, and of course when COVID came in, then we really needed to take a look at how could we do that a little bit differently than we had planned and incorporate some of that distance learning and those supports. And of course, the demand just grew at that point.
Okay. So the goal is to train through this program 120 personal support workers, right?
Correct.
In 10 months.
Yes.
Is that, it seems pretty fast. Is that a fast track type program, or?
It's not necessarily a fast track.
Okay.
Typically, with their college partners, it's 26 weeks to earn a personal support worker certification.
Oh, I see. Okay.
But what we are doing within this is we were able to work with the employers who were really expressing that they had a huge need to get job seekers into the workforce quicker than the 26 weeks. So what we did is we developed what we call the Earn As You Learn pathway. So we were able to work with the colleges to rearrange a few of the courses so that we could provide the students with the competencies, both the hard and soft skill competencies that would be needed to enter the workforce early. So for example, at 5 weeks after starting the program, an individual could be eligible to work with an employer as a residential care assistant. At 10 weeks, they could be eligible to work as a home support worker, and they would continue to work while they're going to school in order to get their full PSW credential. So it gives an opportunity for people to understand the sector and start to work and earn income. And it also takes some of those pressures off of the employers that they were experiencing.
Right. And are they getting paid while they're taking this program? I mean, it says earn as you learn. I'm assuming they're being compensated?
Well, they're not being compensated.
No.
Earn As You Learn is to actually, when they're going into the workforce as an RCA or as an HSW, they're actually on the employer's payroll and they're earning some money at that time.
Oh, I see. Okay.
However, with this training, the cost of tuition is 100% covered, and there's no cost to the participants to participate in this training.
Completely covered. Free. It's free.
Completely covered.
Wow.
It is absolutely free. That is correct.
Interesting. Is it full?
We're just starting to recruit, so we actually have lots of space. We're doing our first cohorts are starting with 1 week of soft skills training on March 22nd, and then they start their college training on March 29th.
For somebody who might be listening right now who says, "Oh gosh, that sounds perfect for my whatever, spouse or daughter or son or nephew, niece, whatever the case might be," how do they get involved in something like this?
It's actually quite simple. We have a number of different ways that somebody can get a hold of us. So we do have a website, which is earnasyoulearn.ca.
Okay.
So individuals can go onto that website and they can see all of the information, what the next steps are, the requirements, all of that stuff. But there's also a tab on there where they can book an appointment directly with us, and they can click on that tab and they can get set up for an appointment, and we'll reach out to them and book that appointment. We also have an email, which is earnasyoulearn@pqchc.com, or they can always call us at 613-288-3880.
It's hard right now to get people to work in long-term care or with the elderly as personal support workers, whether it's in a long-term care or a retirement community or as a home support worker, because of the pandemic, because of the pay, because of the lack of job security, all of these things. I'm wondering, what's your experience in trying to, do you have any experience in trying to attract recruits for a program like this, or are you expecting it to be full? Give us a sense of that right now.
Sure. We're just starting to recruit. We've had a lot of interest already. So we have our intakes are full for the next week and a half.
Well, that's good.
As far as new clients coming in, we have some information sessions that we are doing, and those are currently full as well at this point. So what we're doing with the information sessions is we have our employer partners and we have our college partners and we have our own staff in those information sessions. So we're really exploring some of those issues with participants as they're interested in the program to really understand and get a sense of what it's like to work in the industry at this point.
Okay. I thank you for your time. Very interesting initiative. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate being able to come on and talk about it.
Yep.
It's very dear to our hearts.
I bet. Rhonda Beauregard, Manager, Employment Programs, Pinecrest-Queensway Community Health Center. Coming up next, we'll get the very latest with what's happening in Barry's Bay with COVID-19. And coming on the program is going to be Dr. Robert Cushman, Acting Medical Officer of Health for the Renfrew County and District Health Unit. Dr. Cushman's raising the alarm on close contacts of COVID-19 in parts of Renfrew County, around Madawaska Valley Township and Barry's Bay. So that's coming up right after the news on City News.
in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Tuesday, the 23rd of February. Good morning. I'm Sarah Buchan. Right now in Ottawa and in Smiths Falls, cloudy skies and +2. Here's what's making news this hour. Provincial health officials report 975 new cases of COVID-19 in Ontario and 12 new deaths attributed to the virus. The figures out of just under 26,000 tests. Public Health Ontario reporting 18 new cases in Ottawa. Yesterday, the health unit confirmed 55 new cases and 1 new death. Elsewhere locally, 2 new cases for Eastern Ontario, none for Leeds, Grenville, Lanark, and 2 new cases in Renfrew County. The local health units update their numbers in the afternoon. Ottawa Public Health is looking for 6 people who were part of a ride share from Toronto to Ottawa last week. Those people have been exposed to a 7th person who tested positive for COVID-19. The health unit says the ride share left Yorkdale Shopping Centre around 1 o'clock last Tuesday, February 16th. And arrived in Ottawa at about 6 o'clock in the evening with stops at Bayshore Shopping Centre, the Rideau Centre, and Saint Laurent Shopping Centre. Part of contact tracing is following up with close contacts of positive cases. The 6 people that were in the van were exposed to a COVID-19 case during the contagious period. Those people are urged to self-isolate and contact Ottawa Public Health. This afternoon's meeting between Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and U.S. President Joe Biden will not have any of the usual trappings. Biden's first bilateral meeting as president will be virtual. This morning, the White House released plans for a roadmap for progress in areas of mutual interest, such as COVID-19 and climate change. I'm Sarah Buchan. For news anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
He's the opinionated Ottawa icon.
The Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
And Dr. Robert Cushman joins me on the line. He is the Acting Medical Officer of Health, Renfrew County and District Health Unit. Good morning, Doctor.
Good morning.
Yeah, it's very nice to hear from you. I'm looking at the website right now for the Renfrew County and District Health Unit, where the information is there about COVID-19 local cases. 3 new cases were reported yesterday. I believe I just heard in our newscast, none for today. Since all of this began, 2 people have died, unfortunately. 321 confirmed cases at all, 308 resolved cases. The situation seems to be well in hand, and yet you are worried. What has you worried?
Well, we've looked at the cases that, let me start again. After the lockdown on Boxing Day and the subsequent second lockdown, we saw a lot of cases. December was our worst month. Things really started to drop off nicely, as you would expect, about the 12th of January. And then we were going along very well. We were having a case about every other day, and that's why we were able to get back into green before other areas. But now I'm starting to see it's not really worrisome. I mean, I think last week we only had 8 cases, so more than 1 a day. But when you look at these, something becomes very clear. When you do the contact tracing, you see that people think, oh, the lockdown's been lifted, it's back to normal. Well, it's not back to normal. And certainly the businesses, you can get your hair done, you can go to a restaurant, you can go to a bar, but it's up to the business owners and their clients and their staff to make sure the rules are observed. But there's another problem with how people are socializing amongst themselves informally. And that's where we see that people are going well beyond their household contacts. And what we're seeing 2 things. One is travel, and you just alluded to that in your newscast about a ride share coming into Ottawa where 6 people got exposed. We're seeing travel, and people travel often to see family and friends who aren't in their household. Secondly, the other thing we're seeing, and we see this at workplaces all the time. We've seen it in a dentist's office. We've seen it in a hospital. We've seen it in a auto body shop, where somehow people let down their guard. We've seen it in a school too, where people let down their guard and they socialize at noon around the table for pizza. I mean, my dentist yesterday told me that he'd called off a pizza party for that very reason. and good on him. So this is an issue. So basically what I'm seeing, and then we've had some stuff that's just wanton sort of disregard for public health. I mean, we've seen overnight sleepovers amongst adults, young adults. We've seen bonfires, and we've heard about snowmobiles and parties and, all these other things. So, I mean, that's untenable. I mean, we can't really accept that. But what we're seeing is that people don't realize that we're not back to normal. We have to be extremely careful, especially with these variants, which are much more contagious, that spread much more quickly. So that's my concern. And we've identified certain areas. We had trouble up in the Barry's Bay and region.
Yeah, what was going on there? What was going on there, Doctor? What was going on there?
Well, we've seen they're 1/8 of our population, and yet they were 1/3 of our cases as of last week in 2021. So clearly something's wrong up there. And we'd had complaints up there about visitors coming in from afar, coming through Algonquin Park to stay and to snowmobile and to party. And we've also had some anti-masking demonstrations up there and some complaints from merchants. So hopefully that'll, we'll see some improvements there. And sure enough, I'm sure next week it'll be someplace else. There's some inkling now that we're having problems in the Arnprior area, another sort of border area, because there was a lot of activity with Ottawa when we opened before they did.
Yeah. I was also wondering how, I mean, this, that a lot of, especially now, where people are kind of fleeing the big city, right? And, you used to work in Ottawa. You used to be the chief medical officer of health in the city of Ottawa, and now you're in Renfrew County. You're kind of like a pioneer in that sense, I guess, Dr. Cushman. But you have retirement. I hope you're enjoying your retirement. I do wonder, though. You have people who, on a daily basis, they go to work in Ottawa. They come back to the Ottawa Valley. They come back to Arnprior. They come back to Renfrew. Some of them might come back to Barry's Bay, for example. Were you always, through all of this, worried about people going to Ottawa and then coming back to small towns and spreading COVID-19?
We were, but our track record is exemplary. I mean, yes. Dr. Paul has had much bigger problems in eastern counties than we have, and I think that reflects the fact that there's more traffic. Actually, but we've been very diligent all along, and with a little bit of luck and a little bit of hard work and some really good contact tracing on our part, we've been able to do this. And as I said earlier, if people observe the rules at work and observe the rules at home, we should do fine. It's when they don't, it's when they expand their social circle. It's when they take off their mask and have lunch at a small table in the lunchroom too close to one of their colleagues. That's when bad things happen. Or when, people have parties in their own household. But we've been really lucky. As I said, we've worked hard. The public in Renfrew County have done their best. I've always said they're the offense in this war. We're the defense. We're the ones who do the contact tracing and limit the spread, but they're the ones who keep the spread out. And in terms of travel, in terms of social gathering, and this is what's really important. And I think they've done a great job, barring a few exceptions.
Yeah, but nevertheless, it sounds as though there is this kind of signal, the stay-at-home order has been lifted, or, we're in the green zone. I can be less vigilant now. And maybe that's fatigue, Doctor, right?
Well,
it's a year of this.
Fatigue.
Right?
No, you're absolutely right. We're all fatigued. And I always tell people, come and spend a day with us. Spend a day with me. Or spend a day with our contact tracing nurses. And you'll really, or the hospital workers, and you'll really sense how fatiguing this is. But you're absolutely right. And I think you hit the nail on the head, is that the combination of fatigue and the combination of going green, in a sense, the two coupled together to give people a false sense of the going's good. But what's really bothering us, and we've heard this from our colleagues in Toronto, is the variants and how they do spread more rapidly. And Toronto's actually predicting this is going to be the third wave. So we're watching that like a hawk, and we're dealing with it on a day-to-day basis. Ottawa's only had a handful of cases. We in Renfrew County to date have had none that we know of.
Of the variants.
Yes.
Okay.
But you're exactly right. We're all sick and tired of this.
Sure.
Winter, we're sick and tired of being cooped up over winter. But watch out, wave 3 with variants, and that's why people have to realize, yes, you can get your hair done. Yes, you can go to a restaurant. Yes, you can go to a bar. But when you're at work and when you're at home and when you're in those venues, pay strict attention to what the rules are, because it's up to you.
Well, should those establishments be open at all, Doctor, since you're so concerned?
They've suffered. The economy suffered enough, and we thought, I certainly worked hard with the ministry and with my MPP, John Yakubuski, to get this going. He worked with his cabinet colleagues, and we were confident. Renfrew, only seeing a case every 2 days for a population of over 100,000, that we could do this. But we always said that this, we could change this on a dime. And we're watching that, and we hope we don't have to do it.
Okay, the provincial government has said it's going to be largely up to the individual health units to determine the rollout of vaccines. That they have the general guidelines, which I'm assuming means age for the most part, but the nuts and bolts of it seems to be left up to you. The where and when and this kind of stuff. How prepared are you for a ramp up in vaccine distribution?
Well, because we've had really good numbers in Renfrew County, we're at the end of the queue when it comes to vaccine. As we speak, we have only vaccinated 908 long-term care residents. We're hoping this weekend to get our first doses for the long-term care workers and for the family members that are essential caregivers. Our second doses are a little behind, but we expect those for the first of 908. We expect those shortly. But so we do have a plan. We've divided the county and district into 5 areas, and each of these groups has a plan, and they're having a mix of hockey rink clinics and mobile clinics and efforts by EMS, the paramedics, to go out and find people who are isolated. Certainly the age factor is playing in there, and seniors in congregate living, but the province has really decided that the healthcare sector needs to prioritize their workers, and those workers will actually come before seniors who aren't in long-term care.
Okay, so the doses, just so I have this right, 908 residents in long-term care in Renfrew County, right?
Yes.
Have they received 2 doses or 1?
And yes, number 1, and that's everyone who wanted one. There's a handful of people who didn't want one for one reason or another.
Right.
So we've completed the first dose, but you see, Ottawa's way, way ahead of us on that. They've done retirement homes. They've done a lot of healthcare workers. But again, Ottawa's borne the brunt of COVID-19 a lot more than we have.
Right.
So we understand that we're this is a needs-based allotment of vaccines, and the big cities, the GTA and Ottawa, come before we do. But on the other hand, it's tough on our population because it means that they have to pay strict observance to the public health guidelines while they're patiently awaiting their vaccine.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Cushman, for your time today.
My pleasure. Have a good day.
Yeah, you too. Yeah, very informative. That is Dr. Robert Cushman. He's the acting medical officer of health for Renfrew County and District Health Unit. They had 3 cases yesterday, no cases today. 11:44. We're right back. We will talk about Telesat and how it's going toe-to-toe with Elon Musk in the internet space race. Coming up, Rob Snow Show, City News.
So Rideau Rockcliffe Community Resource Centre has been around since 1982, and it's here to serve residents of Ward 13. So our focus is on helping to reduce poverty in this community, as well as empowering residents to find resilience within themselves. So one of the new focuses of our centre is around food programming. So you'll notice today when we go around on a little tour that we have a number of food programs here at the centre. So one being obviously our emergency food program, which is really great. So residents can come and access food when they are in need. We also have a number of food-based social enterprises here at Rideau Rockcliffe as well. So one being the Ottawa Good Food Box, another being Market Mobile. One of our new initiatives that started this year as response to COVID is called Good Food on the Move, and it's a click and collect online store, and we have 7 pickup locations throughout the city. More sort of local here for Ward 13 residents, we've also started a free produce market as well. So community members can come on Wednesdays and Fridays and be able to access additional free fruits and vegetables.
Social Harvest Ottawa is one of the social enterprises here at the Rideau Rockcliffe Community Resource Centre. We operate this great urban greenhouse, and our work is not only to grow nutritious and delicious food, but also to nourish communities with community members here in Ward 13 and beyond. The greenhouse is a year-round project. We're a team of 4 employees working here. We have 2 full-time employees and 2 part-time employees. We focus on growing microgreens from late fall to early spring and hothouse crops in the summertime, such as tomatoes and cucumbers.
The Mission Food Truck we're in our 5th week of collaborating with them to come visit our center, and we just got in on it at the right time. They were looking for new communities to branch out to. They said absolutely. Right now they're funded through donations. They travel around Ottawa and just give out delicious, fresh, hot food to people as well. We have at our center the Ottawa Good Food Box as well as the Marketmobile. So Ottawa Good Food Box has been around for 25 years and Marketmobile is a little younger, started in 2014. So they both have the mission and the mandate of making fresh food more accessible and affordable in neighborhoods that lack access to a grocery store. So I think the greatest need that we've seen as a result of the pandemic in our community is people that we maybe have never needed to access our services before, right? So a lot of people have had, layoffs. Maybe they're just not able to work because they have to stay home with their children, over the summer, that sort of thing. So we've definitely seen the need go out, particularly for our food programming, as well as some of our counseling services as well. So it's a heavy time for people emotionally.
Strong opinions.
Rob Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Telesat has been around for 50 years in Ottawa, and it now plans to build a major campus in Gatineau, and that campus will eventually oversee the operations of a multi-billion-dollar fleet of satellites that are going to, Telesat hopes, deliver high-speed internet around the world. The project is called Lightspeed, and we are joined right now from Telesat by the Director of LEO Systems Engineering at Telesat, Michel Foray. And good morning.
Hello, good morning.
Yeah, it's very nice to hear from you.
Yep, thanks.
What is Lightspeed?
Oh, okay. Yeah, Lightspeed is our project of this LEO constellation. As you just explained, we've been working on that for nearly 5 years now, and we're quite pleased that it comes out in the public now that we're going ahead with the details. So the Lightspeed satellites are essentially providing wideband broadband services for internet and other communication services from low Earth orbit, and this is the departure from the heritage from at Telesat, where we, for the last 50 years, we've been operating what we call geostationary satellites, and these are very good to offer services either regionally over Canada or over large regions of the world, but they suffer from a longer delay of propagation to that we call latency. And so by placing LEO satellites in lower Earth orbit, around 1,000 kilometers, then it improves significantly the quality of the service, and with very snappy and fast reaction. So
snappy, I like that. Snappy, yeah, perfect. Right, yeah, and by latency, you mean, for the home user, if they picture themselves watching Netflix or whatever the case might be, you get buffering, right? Because
exactly.
Yeah,
so the latency is really the propagation delay. So in geostationary orbit, the full round trip can approach 1 second. conversation. So you can typically hear that if you have a phone conversation that is using a satellite channel, you'll see the delay in the response of who you speak to. And with LEO, essentially you'll make that nearly not perceptible by the user. So for internet, it's very, very, very good because it makes the service quality much better.
Yeah. What kind of speeds are you talking about? I mean, comparable to what you would get with, I guess, terrestrial high-speed internet, right? Yeah.
Yes, exactly. We've designed the system so that we can offer really, really high speeds and that are similar to what you get from any ISPs. So in essence, the total constellation will deliver multiple terabits per second of capacity. And is capable of delivering gigabit per second into terminals. So the capability is very, very high, and in turn, it can deliver services that to end users that are comparable to what they experience in cities, for instance.
Anywhere.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah,
that's the great advantage, right? Whether you're rural, remote, in the middle of the woods, whatever the case might be.
Yeah, exactly. So this system, we designed it to offer the services to a wide range of applications, from terrestrial connectivity for communities that are more in the rural areas, or even mobile terminals on airplanes, on ships, and any type of application that needs high-speed connectivity with where there's no existing infrastructure locally. Right. Obviously, for mobiles, this is there's no option. Satellite is required, and this type of constellation offers really an appealing performance for these services.
Okay. So you have a hardware partnership with a French-Italian manufacturer, Thales Space, right? So what does Telesat do? Are you actually building these LEO satellites? You're building them?
So Telesat is a satellite operator. So
operator, okay.
Normally,
not manufacturer.
We as opposed to a manufacturer. Yeah.
Okay.
So we specify the requirements of what we need, and we pick a manufacturer that can satisfy these requirements to the best way, and then we get them to produce the satellites, and then we organize the launch campaigns, and then we operate the satellites once in orbit to provide the services to our customers.
How many satellites are you going to do?
So for this constellation, the nominal number of satellites is 298, so nearly 300.
Wow.
And this is the size of the constellation that will allow us to offer services anywhere on the globe, obviously including Canada, which is our home market. But the plan is to be able to offer that anywhere in the world.
At what altitude do these satellites go up?
So the satellites are planned to go at about 1,000 kilometers.
Okay.
So this is the normal orbit that corresponds to our license. We have a license to operate. We need to have a license to operate these. So at this altitude, as I mentioned earlier, this will provide a very fast response and very low latency compared to GEO satellites.
1,000 kilometers, okay, right? So, who launches them for you? Where do they launch from?
So we have not completed all the final agreements with all the launch providers.
Oh, I see. Okay.
We have an agreement with already with Blue Origin, U.S. based. This is Jeff Bezos'
company.
Company.
Yeah.
So we have an agreement with them for launching on their new launch vehicle that is being developed, and we're in discussion with all the other primary launch service providers, including SpaceX and Ariane Space and others. So we're in the middle of finalizing that, and in order to get the full launch campaign secured shortly.
It sounds like such a cool job that you have.
I have to say, though, that you're absolutely right. So this is, for us engineers working on this type of project, this is probably the most exciting engineering project we can think of in Canada currently. So we're very pleased to be able to work on that.
So when I think about this facility that you're going to build in Gatineau, it sounds almost like air traffic control.
To some extent. So it's more, it's really a network operation center. Because the services that we will be offering with Lightspeed are really meant to be like any other large global network. It's simply that we are using satellites to deliver the services. There's a need to have a global network operation center, and we decided to install it in Gatineau. And so the function really of this network operation center is to manage all the operations of the entire network from the terrestrial landing stations or the Earth stations that connects to the satellite that we'll have globally, the satellites themselves, and then all the remote terminals that will be at the user's premise.
Yeah.
And from that location, the team there in place will have a group of experts of IT, cybersecurity, engineering, and anything related to the support of the operations, day-to-day operation of the network.
I want to say you're in what's called the enterprise side of things. Your service would be more for a business customer, not for Rob Snow's house, whatever.
But
right?
indirectly, yes, it could be at your house. Our intended customers are essentially the service providers.
Providers.
Yeah.
Okay.
So service providers that wish to offer services in a remote area that.
I see. Okay.
And instead of having to lay down fiber, which is expensive, it will be easier for them to get the high capacity terminal located in a community, get the backhaul from our satellites back to their central office, and then offer locally the last mile connection to the users as they do normally with any market.
Okay.
So this is how we.
This program is brought to you by Ignite TV. Now you're in command.